Good afternoon. We are back and live. We're ready to go. We have a very short strategic and operational excellence committee. I'm going to go ahead and pass the meeting over to Regent Dickinson, who chairs that committee.
Thank you. And that's our meeting. Welcome, everybody.
Boy, you're adjourned.
I just want to acknowledge you have a WSU System Strategic Plan Progress Report in your board book here. And I, again, as always, like to thank Christine Point, our Vice President for Strategy Planning and Analysis. She and I have gone back and forth working a lot on different things for the purpose of President Cantwell's onboarding. We have worked to create what we're referring to as a bridge plan, which is the prior strategic plan that is expiring, with just trying to build a bridge for a period of time. Yep. And we've worked hard, I should say Chris and her team have worked incredibly hard to centralize and bring together every single plan that is strategic across the footprint of Washington State University. We've worked to identify the commonalities and a lot areas of alignment, as well as gaps of how do we figure out how these all weave together. And we are working with the board as well to ensure the Board of Regents goals and objectives that are aligned to your goals and objectives all cascade down as a part of the strategic plan. So that is, we're just kind of in a holding pattern, President Cantwell, and can continue to work with you on this, but also we're trying to organize it in a way that it would be digestible.
Love it.
So a big shout out to Chris. Is Christine here? I'm here. Thank you. She does a great job on this. So we will just continue to take our steps forward. We talked about those steps last time, working through what those KPIs might look like. And we will not get too far ahead of anybody on this, but we will at least have something for you. That is my report.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Regent Dickinson.
Leslie, you owe me for this.
You're welcome.
That just gave me so much more time.
And now to our finance committee. I will pass over the meeting to our chair of the Finance and Administration Committee, Regent Ramos.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Shower. And we will need that time. So thank you, Regent Dickinson. We have special guests today who will be part of our process. And I'm going to be really excited to hear from our students who will be presenting as part of our committee process today. So welcome everyone to the Board of Regents Finance and Administration Committee meeting. Today's agenda is definitely full. We will hear 4 information items and discuss 15 action items. We'll start today's meeting with an update on state and federal budget developments that have occurred since our special meeting on February 17th and how these are impacting WSU's fiscal year 26 budget development. And I'll just pause for a moment and express a deep gratitude to all of the regents who participated, as well as our Chief Financial Officer and her staff, to give us a full comprehensive view of the financial situation at WSU on February 17th. So thank you all to the regents. Presenting the update is going to be a team effort. It will include our incoming president, Elizabeth Cantwell, as well as our Vice President for Finance and Administration and Chief Financial Officer, Leslie Brunelli, our Vice President for External Affairs and Government Relations, Linda Becker-Fetcher, and Kim Christian at Provost. I missed Kim's title, but I have Kim listed. Vice President of Research, as well as our Provost, Riley Tillman.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. And the first thing I want to do before we start into this is just say thank you to the External Affairs and Government Relations team who have been working tirelessly right now, reacting, analyzing, and tempering things that are coming out from the federal government and the state government. So to my team, if you're watching, thank you very much for all you're doing for WSU. It's valued and appreciated. Do I have, yeah, go. Okay, I don't know. Okay, we're gonna start by talking about where we are with the state's budget right now. We've presented this slide to you before. This now includes the recent proposal that was laid out by Governor Ferguson. It aligns with where you can see by the columns where our requests were, what Governor Inslee's proposal was, and that's the budget recommendation that the legislature is operating under. And then Governor Ferguson, because under statute, the previous governor is required to submit his or her budget, has put out his budget principle so that he has an impact on what's going on in the negotiations going forward in Olympia. His proposal is fairly consistent with what Governor Inslee put through, with the exception of making permanent our priority around our Native Coug scholarship. Again, though, it's the legislature that will make the final decision on where this is. So we are continuing to advocate for our top 4 priorities there as we're going forward. I will say just a couple things on top of this to think about and to highlight on the current governor's proposed budget. Public education, K through 12, community colleges, public safety agencies, like the Department of Commerce, the Washington State Patrol, were immune from any cuts that he proposed. He did lay out a proposed option for furloughs for all state employees except for corrections, state patrol, state hospitals, saying that would bring about $300 million in savings with a 1 day a month furlough over a 2-year period. He maintained a 3% cut to higher education. However, he didn't prescribe those cuts, which is helpful and was something that our team has been advocating for. Ideally, we would not want to have any cuts, but if higher education does have cuts, we feel that we would be better positioned to make those cuts than to have the state make those cuts for us. They're looking at cutting travel for in-state employees, cutting agency spending across the board, and are looking at he's talking about a $15 billion deficit over 4 years. The legislature has been talking about a $12 billion deficit. We can go to the next. I can go to the next slide.
Don't need to do it.
No, I got it.
Where's the good news?
There's always a silver lining, Regent, always a silver lining. So just wanted to kind of put out some of the things that we continue to highlight in Olympia and that we're continuing to look at. Obviously, pay raises are still on the table, and the cost of living adjustments that we've been advocating for WSU faculty, staff, and employees is there. I mentioned K through 12 special education, or things that are kind of are protected a bit from that. But we're very aware of the impact that and the discussions that are going on in Olympia around the budget and the impact that could have on WSU and our planning internally as Leslie and team are looking at our budget. Yes, you may.
I want to add something about the pay increases is so interesting. Of course, there's still the fund split, so we would still be under the 66% versus 34% that we would have to fund. So that's one of the issues that comes up when we have the tuition discussion. The other thing Glenda mentioned is the governor's budget does include a furlough, and we don't know if higher ed will be exempted from that. If the furlough that the governor included were applicable to higher ed, 1 day per month for 2 years, that is a 4.6% pay reduction to faculty and staff who would be subject to it. So while there may be a pay increase, there would also be this larger furlough impact. So we still have a lot to find out. And again, as Linda said, it's not the governor that determines the spending plan, it is the legislature.
Yeah, and I would add to that he's been in office since January 15th, and this was his opportunity to come out and lay out what his priorities and his goals were as he starts actually negotiating with the state legislature who's writing the budget this year. So we pretty much did talk about this, but at the end of the day, I think that the projected outcome is that there will be a combination of spending cuts and new revenue. There's really no other way around it. Again, I talked about this. There's no no prescriptive cuts given to higher education at this point, which is good. I didn't mention, but I should mention, the community colleges were also exempt from the 3% cut. So this is just for the 5 public baccalaureates in the state. There is some debate going on about whether or not to lift the cap on tuition. I think that discussion is literally underway as we're sitting here. There are pieces of legislation that are being analyzed by our team in the state right now, and I don't have details on those. So I think as they come along, we're happy to keep you in the loop on that. But I think that is actually starting to be part of the conversation now, is to give us a little flexibility. We don't know how long that will be for, if it's permanent, if it's for a couple of years, or what that is, or what the cap may be on changing that tuition authorization.
Yes,
you
one more
can.
thing. Tell me if I remember this correctly. You mentioned that the cuts are not prescriptive for us.
Right.
So do I remember that Eastern, Western, and Central, it is prescriptive?
Absolutely.
It is by line item. They tell them what to reduce. And so I want to point out, I think that's Glenda and her team's good work to make it general versus prescriptive, because we were asked multiple times by OFM to provide a list of what we cut. It was almost offering up a sacrifice, and we did not do that.
That was an intentional decision on our behalf and on behalf of University of Washington to go in with non-prescriptive cuts, because, and we have been, and as President Schultz has been with us in Olympia, and Chris Mulick and his team have been there, we have been consistent in messaging around the fact that this is one financial challenge that the institution is having with the state of Washington. We are internally looking at our financial situation and have made upwards of 10% cuts over the years to get our financial house back in order. And on top of that, now we're dealing with the federal challenges that we're facing that are coming at rapid pace and indiscriminately. So I think that message has resonated, but it's resonated with empathy. It hasn't resonated with any kind of conclusion, because they're operating under a $12 to $15 billion deficit over 4 years as well. Yes, you may. That's fine. You just chime in.
You may remember from the meeting on the 17th that we showed you the difference between general fund appropriations and proviso specific appropriations, which do have the impact of being a state earmark. If the reduction is on the big number and they only allow us to reduce the general fund number, that feels like the effect will be larger to us. So we have a lot of work to do should cuts become real, to determine whether or not provisos can be at least reduced in a pro rata way or outright returned.
Right.
And we don't do that any longer. So that's a lot of work ahead of us, because we have quite a slate of proviso funds.
And one of the things that Chris and I have been talking about is a broader discussion about how the state makes the determination for what provisos are, because we also do earmarks on the federal side of things. And Congress has established a very detailed process to make sure that those things can happen, they can be funded. We've learned a lot through that process, including what do we need to do to make sure that we're covering operations and maintenance and that they're aligned with our strategic priorities. But I think that there might be some lessons learned from how how our congressional representatives have approached earmarks versus how our elected officials in Olympia have approached provisos. So I may be barking up a very tall tree on this, but I think it's an interesting conversation to start having, and I'm saying that publicly. So we'll go to the last slide. These are just some key dates that we need to keep an eye on in Olympia. Obviously, March 18th, the next revenue forecast will come out. After that happens, that's when the budget writing will really start happening in Olympia. So between now and March 18th, all feet are on the ground. Everybody's really engaged on the Hill in Olympia, having these conversations about impacts, and a lot of ideas are floating around. So Chris and our team are on the ground working very hard on this. I'm looking, did you have something?
No.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
Traumatized her.
Trauma, it's perfect. I can handle her. Their operating budgets will be released March 24th and March 31st, and the target sine die date is April 27th. But there is some conversation down there that there may be a call for a special session later on in the year, or it could go longer depending on what happens with the revenue forecast. So I don't know if you've heard anything, Regent Hunt.
Fine with me.
Okay, because you're not there right now, right?
Right.
And just to add some more context here, 'cause I can't resist. Our budget hearings start on April the 20th now to accommodate President Campbell's calendar. They will run mostly into the first week of May, which puts us right up against the end of the academic term. The good news about moving them that late is we will have better information from the House and Senate budget and
We
won't
hope.
just be speculating. We hope. And, we have our tentative deadline to provide the budget to you on May the 21st. If their schedule shifts, then our schedule will have to shift as well.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Washington, DC right now. And we're going to start with some of the agency decisions and what we know thus far about the impacts or potential impacts we had at WSU. I know we've heard a lot about a strategy to go in and let go a lot of probationary employees within the federal agencies. A lot of these employees are being told to come back or are coming back, but the initial actions on this affected a lot of our ARS colleagues that we have, and WSU continues to highlight the unique relationship we have with the Agricultural Research Service, ARS, and that you don't know who are WSU employees, you don't know who are ARS employees. They work collaboratively together, but they also rely on each other financially. So had those 120 senior scientists been completely let go, it would have had a real impact on our financial situation as well at WSU. 119, as of last night, 119 of 120 of those scientists have been returned to their jobs. There's one that is still in flux, who is a hops researcher down in this part of the state. NSF employees were brought back, and also this afternoon, President Trump had a cabinet level meeting where he pulled in Elon Musk and told his cabinet officials that they were now in charge of this. They were to take the recommendations from him, and he was not going to go in and make the cuts how he has been doing. So you're starting to see a little bit of a shift of the dynamic of the power going back to the agencies to make these decisions. I know that Kim has talked about this, and we'll probably talk about it again, but the NIH indirect rate cap has a huge impact on not only us, but on our colleagues at University of Washington. Our federal team and our health policy sciences team has been working collaboratively with University of Washington and a lot of our health sciences partners over there, including Fred Hutch, Seattle Children's, Providence, to try to bring together a coalition to talk about the impact of what any change to the indirect rate costs would be to our medical research in the Seattle area. I will also note with that on an annual basis, Congress has actually put in their appropriations bill language that prohibits the NIH indirect costs from being adjusted. So that is why there have been legal challenges to this, and that's why we're seeing where things are. So I'll talk a little bit about this around the federal appropriations process, but that will likely be an issue that comes up in the next continuing resolution and going into FY26. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just that yesterday there was a nationwide injunction that stops them from raising the F&A cap and NIH. And so we're seeing that because there was was it only the 22 states? I wish Washington was one, but that's for everybody. If you do read the whole 62-page ruling, WSU's examples for reasons why this would be detrimental are on page 62 of that. So we were asked in one of the town halls, like, what are you all doing? Are you pushing back? We are. We're working with our attorney generals. We're working with the state to provide them impact statements of what type of impact you would see if you started to cut NIH and other indirect rates.
And we're using that same information with our entire congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. to provide them with examples of what these impacts are, just so that they understand as things come before them with votes or they're having conversations with their constituents, they understand that these decisions that are being made have real world impacts on the work that's being done in the state of
Can I ask a
Washington.
quick
Yes.
question about that?
Yes.
Great, NIH has gotten all the attention on this with the indirect cost rates. Are there current impacts on other indirect cost rates across?
Not yet. There's been whispers of it. And in our APLU meeting, there were whispers that potentially NSF and DOD would go that way, but we haven't seen any yet. So we've made those projections, but we haven't seen any. We've been looking at every single grant that comes through, and it's always a red flag if the indirects are changed, once you put it in, but we haven't had any.
And NIH, I believe, is the only one that has been codified in statute through appropriations. So
Could you remind me what
negotiated average of indirect cost?
Yeah, so our negotiated is 53% on campus, 26 off campus. However, our two biggest funders, USDA and HHS, USDA is capped at 22%. Our NIH rate is 30%. So when we take all of our grants and all of our indirects, our actual average that we get across our research portfolio is 27%. So, and the example that they used in this ruling, we gave them a lot. What they used was how it would affect animals and the animal research that we do. So we have 65,000 animals at WSU across the system, 90% of which are mice and fish that are used in research in every college for all kinds of foundational and applied research. So it's one of those things people aren't thinking of, right? When you think of we have animals that we can't stop taking care of. Right? We can't just stop overnight taking care of the animals.
That
I
might
mean, we
be
could, but that would,
confusing
yeah, we don't want to
people.
do that. Yes.
And to that point, actually, Regent Blankenship, we've really learned in DC that people don't understand this. There's a very small population of staff on Capitol Hill that understand what FNA is. And so our federal team is working with Kim, and we're going to do a briefing for our congressional staff to explain what FNA is and what it means to Washington State University so that they understand that, there are some that think it's just it's extra money that the institution gets, when in reality, it supports the infrastructure of the research that we're doing. It helps pay to put the lights on, it helps take care of the animals, all of this. And they don't understand that. So
With all of our
I don't want
compliance.
to do the Leslie roll here,
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
but it does not.
Thank you.
Our current rates do not come close to covering the research infrastructure.
Right.
Even with the previous rates, we lose money on grants because of the cost of the actual infrastructure to support them. So
All the infrastructure, our compliance infrastructure since 1994 has gone up 175%. We're eating all of those costs.
yes, I have more
Well
good
done.
news.
So on that happy note.
No, so executive orders since March 3rd, President Trump has signed 76 executive orders. He was expected to sign the 77th today around it's not happening, giving directions to the current Secretary of Education on dismantling the department, but he's pulled back on that at this point. Executive orders basically are giving direction to agencies on how they should be implementing current statute. They don't hold the same weight as current statute, but they give direction to them. And so they are taken very seriously. And this is not an unusual number for president to sign. It's unusual in the condensed amount of time that he's done this, but presidents use this tool a lot to actually to move their agenda forward. So the reason, I mean, obviously for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of focus on what may or may not happen with the Department of Education executive order. I will say, should they go down the path of doing that, he will have to have Congress actually move on anything that is at the Department of Education that was created through statute. So if Congress has authorized a program, it can't just be dismantled and moved. Congress has to dismantle and move that so that there is an ability for this process to be much more deliberative than for him to go in and completely change things. There also is a process that the House passes things by a simple majority. The Senate has to have a 60-vote threshold to get something like this on the floor, and Senate Republicans have 53 members right now, so they'd have to get 7 Democrats on board to make these kind of large changes. So there may be some changes made within the Department of Education. I can't tell you what those changes are going to be, but any major restructuring of the agency itself is going to require a partnership with Congress in order to do that. So, but we are watching this very closely. And in all of this, we are working very closely with our Association of Public and Land Grant Universities and collaboratively with University of Washington and with our Pac-12 colleagues.
Just to remind you from the 17th meeting, the dollars that the university receives or our students receive that flow through the Department of Ed is $185 million.
Question.
Put another way, I'm trying to ask a procedural question, not a political question.
Okay.
He does or does not have the authority to close the Department of Education?
He does not have the authority to close the portions of the Department of Education that were created by statute, by congressional authority. he can make change. There are parts of the agency that were put in there that were not created by statute. So,
That's all.
Yeah.
Quick question on that, just to raise the level of anxiety a little bit. Were executive orders so directing the abolishment of the Department of Education to be promulgated regardless of their legality of their of the way they were established? Because we're seeing some evidence that the rationality associated with something like executive orders cannot override federal laws, it is not holding necessarily, and not even all of that is being pushed through a subsequent judicial process
Right.
to halt it. It would be useful to maybe as we go forward, just keep our eye on the relative risk associated with the potential approaches that could be used regardless of the legality, current legal state.
I don't know if Cheryl's out there, but my guess
She
is
left.
she's probably already watching
Yes.
this, but I will definitely raise it with Cheryl.
I will
Powers
tell you
out there.
100%
Yeah.
she is.
And that's really, from my perspective, is a risk to the institution,
Exactly.
a set of, we need to keep our eye on that.
When it's a two-part issue, right? Is there an aggressive, what could be considered illegal, but it's successful nevertheless. And then it's the overcompliance component we're seeing in other areas, that even when there's legal rulings, the people running the agencies are trapped in between. Well, we have the president telling us that, so we have the judicial telling us why, and there's just stasis. And like, what would happen if that hits Pell? What would happen if it hits some other spaces?
We'll go on to the next tool that is being used, and these are called Dear Colleagues. I know that we have had one recently coming out regarding from the Office of Compliance at the Department of Education around DEI, I believe. But I mean, I don't believe, I know that was the case, but Dear Colleagues are also a tool that can be used that require the agencies to actually go in and force them to enforce the law to make sure that they're enforcing it the way that this administration believes it should be utilized. This tool, again, has been used across all administrations, but this one has caused a lot of institutions of higher education and other education institutions some heartburn because of the timing on it. It had such a short turnaround, and the outcome of not complying with this would impact federal funding for institutions. So on March 1st, a frequently asked questions document was released at the urging of our trade association that helped clarify some of this process, but there is still a lot of anxiety and actually a lot of reality to the fact that this could have an impact on federal funding for institutions of higher education, whether they're public or private, if they're not applied, if we are not adhering to the law as it is being interpreted. Do you want to add anything, Chris?
No, I think what these do for us is give us somewhat of a roadmap for the way the administration might be thinking in relation to a national approach to what they call illegal DEI. I think we can look internally in terms of our actual activities, either from the admission standpoint or from a student experience standpoint, and see whether what we're doing would fall into that class or not. We, for example, do not have student organizations which are exclusive and do not allow individuals to participate in activities, which is one of the pieces that's laid out there. But there's also then the more general perception piece on it, and whether I think there's a push in elements of the university to say we need to push back on this particular piece. And I think there's a broader vision that it's a land grant university that's built on the concepts of access and opportunity, we can do the work we need to do under that banner. But the ambiguity of it, it's tied to the number which Leslie put out before. It's the $180 million number. I mean, that's really a game-changing conversation, not just for the university, but for the students who rely on those funds to make college a possibility.
So all these actions are happening, coming from the administration. Congress is still in the midst of doing their jobs that they have to do on an annual basis. The federal fiscal year ended on September 30th. And that is the date that all 12 appropriations bills were supposed to be finished. That hasn't happened since 1997. So we're operating under a continuing resolution, which funds the federal government at last year's fiscal funding levels. What this means for us, and the challenge for WSU with this, is that we have 4 congressionally directed projects that are included in the FY25 budget. We have programmatic funding increases that are new projects that were included in the FY25 budget. If we end up on what likely looks like to be a year-long continuing resolution, which is where we think we're going, all of those new projects, including our 4 earmark projects, will have to start over. And so those 4 earmarks are continuing funding for our hot cell facility, which was a $7 million earmark that was put in by Senator Murray, our aquatic lab upgrades, which was $1.42 million, AI in agriculture at $800,000, and then another AI project for $1.8 million in the Senate. So that would have substantial funding implications on, especially for our hot cell project, which we're already moving along on. Things that it will not impact for WSU, just on the silver lining on this, we have programs in there that have been funded for over years, including some of the work that Kim was talking about around advanced materials, ceramic materials, cybersecurity, all funded through DoD. Those programs have been funded for a few years. Yogi's work, Dr. Gupta's work with the Institute for Shock Physics is part of that project. Our FAA Center for Excellence in Aviation Biofuels will continue to be funded at last year's level. We have work that's being done here with smoke exposure on our wine grapes, herbicide resistance work done in Pullman, our Resilient Livestock Initiative, which is functional genomics, and some of the CDC and NIH funding that we're doing will all continue to be funded at last year's funding. I just wanted to quickly talk about the difference between the federal funding process and what we're hearing about the budget reconciliation process and the budget process, because those are 2 very different processes in Washington, D.C. You hear about the budget in Olympia, and it's the budget in Olympia. In Washington, D.C., the budget reconciliation process is a very unique tool that Congress uses to break through any kind of procedural barriers that might slow things down. So it's a tool that's used for, like it was used for the Build Back Better, inflation reduction, tax packages, things that will have a hard time getting that 60 vote threshold in the Senate. So it's a 2-stage process. They've passed the first stage already, which was last week, where they give instructions to committees and tell them what they need to do. Now they're going to go back and get that. The work is going to be in those individual committees that are dealing with tax packages, ag programs like SNAP that are funded through USDA, like SNAP, potentially some energy programs, increases in fundings, and they'll go back through the legislative process. But it's a unique tool that's used in order to get some big projects done through Congress that can't get done on a normal process. So just to note some key dates to think about in Washington, D.C., on top of what's going on in Olympia. In a normal year, around February 4th, we would have gotten the president's budget request, which for those of us who are old enough to remember this, it reminds me of the Sears Christmas catalog, where you go through and pick out what you really want, and then Congress will fund it. And I used to put little fold over things. That's why I always call it that. He spoke to the Congress this week. Obviously, the continuing resolution expires on March 14th. The budget resolution reconciliation that I talked about needs to be passed by April 15th. May 1st, if Congress does not have a deal on their continuing resolution because of the Budget Control Act, they will go into sequestration, and a 1% automatic cut across all federal funding will go into effect. I don't think they want to do that, so they're going to end up with a long-term continuing resolution. And then we go into the normal end of the fiscal year and some programs that expire at the end of the year. it's a perfect storm in Washington DC right now with all this stuff going on, but we've got a great group of folks working on it, our external team helping us as well. So they're working very hard. I know, like I said at the beginning, our state team is working hard. Our health sciences team is working hard. And there's a lot of collaboration going on amongst institutions and organizations to try to have one strong voice together. So anything?
No, I don't know if my slides were coming up next or.
Kyle, do it. You want me to do it for you?
There's nothing there. I don't know.
It's a
Talk a little bit about how you would like the board to sort of be engaged with both Washington DC and Olympia, you know, how if Regents want to help, what is it that we need? And it can be, we don't need anything right now, but we may need something in 2 weeks. That'll come up. And I think it's important to at least have a little bit of discussion on that.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. We haven't utilized you all as much as we probably should in the relationships you have with our elected officials. One thing I didn't mention that we have been doing very actively this year is utilizing our advisory councils. And this year in particular, they've done 2 communications out to their campus elected officials in Olympia. But we've listed the members of the advisory council on the communications to them so that these elected officials know that these are real people behind this that care about Washington State University. I think there may be an opportunity for us to do it in the business they call grass tops work, where you as leaders in our community can reach out to leaders in the community and just reiterate some of some of the impacts we're having at WSU. I know Regent Dickinson said she was in DC with her in her real world job. And this came up in her meetings with Senator Murray, and she talked about the fact that WSU is facing unique circumstances. I think what we can do that might be helpful is just provide you with that information and maybe some top level talking points so that if you run across, especially our federal delegation, you can let them know that, you know, and I've described it as we're in a vice because we're getting this from this, we're experiencing challenges from the state side, the federal side, and we're trying to address this internally. And it's squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And I actually had a conversation with a former colleague of mine yesterday about this who does crisis communications. And she said she had no idea that we're kind of unique in this situation in our state. The rest of the land grant institutions are facing their challenges, but we are unique in the magnitude of the challenges we're facing right now. So yes, I think President Schultz, there's definitely an opportunity for us to utilize your leadership and your voices. I think it needs to be very strategic, and I would be happy to work with you on that.
Linda, can you expand? I was just saying, can you expand on the unique piece? Because it is the fact that we have worked so closely with the federal government on initiatives that have had impacts in the state. That's the unique space.
It's our stakeholders. We are, when I was doing federal relations, I would have colleagues from around the country come up to me and ask me how we got our ag stakeholders involved in supporting us around our ARS facility that's being built on campus, or in creating an avenue for funding for the Research Facilities Act, which is a program that funds ag research facilities through USDA. It had been created in the late 1960s and never funded until we got our stakeholders involved. And then that kind of grew into getting, a group of 300 ag stakeholders sending a letter to the chairman of the ag committees telling them to fund this. So, we are going to be looking for more opportunities to engage broader groups of our stakeholders. We met with some of our ag folks earlier this week, and they are very eager to kind of start talking about what the impact is on some of these changes coming down from Washington, DC on, and we are not directly impacted by tariffs, but we are, because they impact our colleagues who are doing the research, who support endowed faculty positions, who support facilities, and who support the research. So there is definitely an impact on this. And we have always been a partner with them on their biggest issue, which is trade. So I think we're gonna spend more time working with our stakeholders, and I'm gonna do that. So, Regent, right?
Do I think they're called lobbying days. Do lobbying days work for private sector industries or educational groups or not-for-profit groups go to either Washington or Olympia to lobby their, their delegations all on the same day?
Sometimes
In
it
other
just,
words,
it, they
would you
do.
Gather us to go to DC or Olympia.
Yeah, well, Regent Pika and Regent Cerna were in DC in Olympia last month. And I think there is nothing more, and I was a Hill staffer for 8 years. So you pay attention to the members and the groups that are coming in from your state and your district, and you pay attention to them when they can tell you what that impact is at home. And so I think, yes, that is extremely important. So, I think it's more difficult when you don't have that information about it means this at home as a former recipient of this. And I have always tried, and our team always does this, is to make sure that when we have any group of WSU faculty, researchers, staffers in Washington, DC or Olympia, we're bringing the story back to them to help them understand what it means in their communities. I will also say in March, we called it March Madness in Washington, DC, because you would have 15-minute meetings and it would be, you would literally have 15-minute meetings for 45 minutes of an hour break and then do it again. And so it would get very overwhelming. One tool that we like to do is bring people to our campuses. And because with our elected officials, you'll get an hour with them on a campus versus getting 15 minutes in a meeting in an office. And so we had Congressman Baumgartner on campus 2 weeks ago where he came down for a basketball game, and we took him over and talked about FNA and showed him the Allen School and talked about our global health work. And then we had him meet with a group of students, and so he spent 2 hours with us there, which was meaningful. So
Thank you.
you bet.
Okay.
Well, I'm 4 miles away. Let me know.
We will. Thank you, Regent Hunt.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on our research side. So this slide hasn't changed a lot since February 17th when we met, but I just wanted to show it again for everyone so we can kind of get a scale of our active grants and where we are right now, around 229 million active grants across the system. So as Glenda said, of course, these executive orders have been flowing. The most recent one, if you're on February 26th, Executive Order 14222. This one is potentially, we're keeping a really close eye on this because it directed all agencies to review all grants, contracts, and leases for quote unquote efficiency. And it allows them to terminate those by law if they're not in alignment with federal policy. And so they've been using the 2 CFR 200 of the Federal Regulation Code to terminate awards that no longer fit agency priorities. And that's completely legal. It's in the contracts. We do have some of those, and I'll get to that in a minute. It specifically calls out educational institutions for priority reviews. So this is something that we are keeping a close eye on. We haven't had a lot of these yet. I'll get to that slide, but this is something that is potentially worrisome. So this is where we are. So on February 17th, when I talked to you, we had 12 grants under either stop work orders or terminations. We now have 13. This is a different set of 13. However, some things have come on and off. And actually, since this morning, the 2 USAID awards that are in the stop work are now in termination. So we have all of our USAID awards are now terminated. We are able to now through the statute, the ruling that came out yesterday, we are able to bill for those through February 14th. So we will be billing. So the outstanding receivables that you see there, that's the 773 some million that we will be able to collect. The balance, however, there's no work to be done. So that 3.8 million is not revenue that we will be able to realize. So that was what was left on each of those grants. So that is lost. The stop work orders, we are still waiting to see on those. I will tell you, there's a little bit of chaos of things moving back and forth from the stop work back or from the terminated back to the stop work. So we had one of our DOD Air Force on the stop work and are on the terminated back to the stop work. We're still going back and forth with the agency. So there is a lot of truth to the fact, and I heard this yesterday from our PNNL colleagues, there's just a lot of chaos in DC in these organizations right hand doesn't know what left hand's doing. So we did see the full Minerva project for DoD cut. So that was a program across universities. We did have one grant, $3 million grant in there. It doesn't show up here because we had not executed the contract fully yet. So it doesn't actually show up, but we had received the award, but we hadn't executed the contract. So it doesn't show up as revenue lost. But for that professor, obviously that is revenue and research lost. Okay. And so I wanted to talk about, sorry, yeah.
All right. Do we have any sense of where the layoff numbers might be if those are maintained?
Layoffs in,
WSU, whatever, I mean, are
Yeah.
people associated with
Right.
WSU?
so we have over 1,100 employees that are fully funded on grants. We have 880 that are partially funded. That partially could be 1%, could be 90%. And so that's, I mean, if that would be a doomsday scenario, but yes.
Yeah,
What?
for the 6 million on the prior slide.
Oh, on the prior slide, no, we could dig down and into each of those. Yeah, I mean, the biggest bucket, so if I go back. So the biggest bucket on the terminated are the USAID, which we knew about. The biggest bucket on the stop work order is our hydrogen hub. So 83% of that 3 million is in DOE and our hydrogen hub. So that's the vast majority of it right there. And they are going back and forth. Kate McAteer, who's the PI for us on that grant, could talk a little bit more about it. They've been in constant conversation with DOE and with the prime on that. So like I said, we had a full stop work and now we are able to do some work on that. The Justice 40 and the DEI components are not coming back. And the community benefits is, we're working to make sure that we can do the tribal work on that. We've made inroads with them, separating the tribal outreach from community benefits. Since the tribal outreach is nation to nation, we're really dealing with sovereign nations there. So I know we've sent a letter and they've been talking to them about that. But yeah,
I was just gonna say the Hydrogen Hub president and CEO is in DC this week, and our team has been with them as they've been having some meetings on the Hill and at the agency talking through this. And I know that Kate and Kim have been having conversations with that team as well as have the government relations part of this, but it's something that's definitely we've been raising with the congressional delegation as well.
And this is just to, put this in a little bit of perspective. All of this total is 3% of our $229 million research portfolio at the moment of active grants. I'm not minimizing this, but that's what we're looking at right here.
Sorry to go back to something Kirk just said. This implies that some people will not have jobs.
So in the USAID ones where we have people who are fully on soft money, they're being moved over to other money. So they're being moved over to state funding, they're moved over to other grants. This is within the College of Veterinary Medicine because they want to keep those programs running. They have a reputation in these countries. This is mainly in Kenya and Tanzania where that work is taking place.
And they have the funding with which to do that?
They have the funding with which to do that right now. I don't know for how long. Those are ongoing conversations that we're having with them right now. They will have to lay off some people. I know that on short-term projects, they did say when we talked to the dean that there will be some layoffs related to that. In terms of the DOE, the hydrogen hub, I think I'd leave that for Kate, but I know that at least 2 of the people who are working on the community benefits and tribal side have been moved over to the business development portion. It's not a long-term strategy.
So one of the challenges that we're having is with this back and forth. So for example, at X point in time, we lost, I think it was 6 ARS members. We put them on funding for a delineated amount of time. They have all now returned back. And so it wouldn't be better if when they were cutting something, it was actually final. But it would be better from a planning standpoint. What we're now left is the uncomfortable question of how long do we try to sustain an operation so that if if it comes back, or in some of these instances, alternative funding is found, alternative external funding, we don't have the internal funding to do this long term. We haven't lost the infrastructure. We haven't lost, and in some of these places, you literally can pull out of country, and then that essentially be it.
Right.
So, but it's a difficult conversation. Unit's going to have to be able to back it for X amount of time, and it's a dangerous game. But 120 ARS senior scientists gone, 119 back. I mean, the back and forth of this is
Right.
insane.
Right. And I will say, and Leslie can speak to this too, we've had very frank conversations with PIs, with deans, with chairs, that we can't absorb this at the central level, that if there are stop work orders or if things are terminated, that they are going to have to deal with that at the unit level. At least that's where we're at now.
And they can't burn all of their unit capital on that, because that is our university working capital as well. So it's not just the unit burning the money themselves. That's our total fund balance. That's what's in the unit.
And we are effectively substituting state money for federal money in the hopes that some of that federal money will come back.
Some
I think we need
states,
to be clear.
some
In
gift.
some
That we are-
of those cases, not all. I mean, like I said, the vast majority of the terminations is the USAID, because all of that
Yeah.
went away. And the vast majority of the stop work is the one hydrogen hub grant. So if we look at our overall portfolio, it is a small percentage.
Some states, some gifts, some
Yeah.
other projects that
I just think it takes, it's probably nationally true, but it's an important message. States are bearing the burden.
Right.
It's-
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. My colleagues on some of the APLU board calls that we've been on, there are some universities that people are dealing with this in different ways. Some are floating this from their central offices, and they have different financial scenarios than we do.
I think the other piece that's really important for us all particularly in the state, to realize this back and forth is costing us money. Even if it comes back, what's happening in the in-between.
Right, you expended
Right.
state
Yeah.
funds.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even if we quote unquote get it back, there are other expenses around it, and you did nail it. We're also talking about people's lives and people's jobs, and
Right.
this is across our WSU communities, is already having an impact on people.
So,
Oh, no, I know this is so important, but we're an hour into it, and that means 45 minutes behind.
Oh.
So,
I'll be really quick here. So last time you all asked about awards, and in January, we hadn't, quite seen this, but now we are starting to see awards slow down. So we are cumulatively still above, but there was a sharp downturn in February. And so I won't belabor that. And this is, I think, what Chris was asking for this morning. I did want to end on a positive note, which is to say that in January, throughout the whole entire year, but including January and February, the total numbers of proposals that have been submitted are above our FY24 numbers. And I really do think that is a good indicator that we've not lost morale, that our PIs are still determined, that they're still out there doing their research. And when things come back, we're still going to have grants that are submitted. And so I don't think that's a small thing to skip over.
Good news.
It reminds me of an era when earmarks were under attack and we had to pivot to the current model of
Mhm.
grant funding. We'll get through it.
Right.
I know that we're already behind. I'm concerned a little bit about the dialogue that is very public relative to layoffs, and wanting to be cautious as to what we're saying in this space as it relates to people's jobs. And so I would make some assumptions that there is strategies and plans in place, that there's an ongoing assessment, and that we are continuing to be committed to making sure that we have the dollars that we need to run the university. at the same time, there are hard decisions in front of us. So I just want to be really careful and sensitive to anyone that might be watching that sees their programs as part of that and that maybe make some connection of dots that we're not ready to make right now relative to their job. So we're doing everything that we can, it sounds like, to make sure that we can try and keep as many of those positions as possible. So I would just say, hang on a minute and let this strategy play out. There's a lot of things we can't control right now and even predict or influence. So just felt compelled to say something. When we start talking about layoffs, that's people, that's jobs, and I don't want folks to make some leaps here yet.
I think it's important to say that this team and their teams and other teams are fighting for every one of those jobs.
And clearly doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update and for the conversation. Just to double down on the sensitivity people have had, I also want to thank the leadership for the communication strategy that's gone out. And keeping everyone informed real time is challenging. But I know the effort's being made, so thank you for the team effort on that.
I will echo that. All the town halls and the information going out to faculty has been amazing. So thank you to the teams that are doing that.
So our next information item is an update on the Regent Budget Ad Hoc Committee presented by Regent Cerna and our CFO Leslie.
This will be pretty short. and
Yes,
sweet.
yes, we can get back on track.
Right, and hopefully get back on track. Is we have met and we had the last big special board meeting Zoom going over February 17th. Where we looked at where we were budget wise and all. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 20th and we'll continue the process as we are preparing the board for the adoption of the budget. That's where we're at. Next, anything else you want to add?
I could just add that the March 20th meeting is probably our last of this subcommittee. It was set up for the special purpose of Regent education, and we will have fulfilled that. At our April Finance and Administration meeting, we will have two really critical pieces of educational information, and that includes a discussion about the health science campuses, which is the committee that Regent Pika is leading, but also our housing and dining folks will be here to talk about their budget, because that's been one that many of you have mentioned to me that you just don't have insight into how that budget works. So that is scheduled for a significant block of time at the April meeting.
And that's my report.
Okay, thanks, Regent Cerna. Regent Pika. Our next information item is with regards to the WSU Health Sciences budget. And is Chancellor DeWald here?
Yes.
Here he is. He'll be joined by Chancellor DeWald, and Executive Vice President of our medical school.
Thank you. We'll just kick it off. This is relatively new to have this financial ad hoc committee oversight. And we've been very busy since January 1. I think we've been in Spokane at least 3 times. Yeah. And we've been concentrating on the medical side of the house. Although when we think health sciences, we think of nursing, we think pharmacy, we think medical. And as we kind of get our group assembled in the next meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, we're bringing pharmacy, we're bringing nursing to the table. We're also bringing philanthropy, knowing how important that is to have that dialogue as part of every meeting going forward. Some really good news. We heard just 2 weeks ago that almost a week ago.
It was a week ago.
And it's preliminary, so but we've been, accreditation's huge, as we all know. It's typically a 6-year process. We had a form of, we were on probation. And so is that group?
Not probation, just the full accreditation with warning.
With warning. Thank you. And so it was moved up. So we, 2 year then, we were looked at last time.
Yes, so they, and if I could, Regent Pickett, so they had planned to do a 3-year review. They moved it up to a 2 for our sites.
So we got a preliminary report. They were there physically present on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We met on a Thursday. And the meeting went really well. Meetings went very well. We expect a good report. So that's very going forward. And just context here again, the medical side of the house, we've been at this only 10 years and we're having our 10th anniversary this year. So pharmacy's been around, nursing's been around, but we're still in our infancy in many ways as we look out on the scene. So, and as Leslie just said, we are going to be in front of all of you next month, April, when we meet in Spokane. And we'll have more to report, but you'll see, for example, Dr. Greger will be present and others. So you can expect that. Leslie, Darrell?
I don't have anything to add. It was very encouraging. It's LCME accreditation, site visit, and Dean Record. The team worked very, very hard. As I mentioned before, just the document that was put together, and this is similar to the other programs, so it was over 5,000 pages of documentation. So we won't learn about the official outcome. We'll get a letter that will come out probably in May, and then in June, LCME meets to make their decision and render their decision to us.
Any questions?
For our last information item, Leslie will be joined by Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer Jennifer Klein to share an update regarding the function.
And I'll start before Jennifer gets moving here with her slides, and we will be brief. This was our first administrative review, and you recall that we made a commitment that we're going to look at our back office activities. The reason we selected human resources to go first was you heard a lot of feedback from our campus community last spring, and we wanted to be aware of that and address that. The other challenge that we had, leadership transition. Jennifer's been in the interim role for almost a year. Well, not quite, three quarters of a year at this point. Feels like it's been 3, but that's okay. So she's been new in her role. And when our previous vice president departed, we were aware that there was a budget overrun in human resources, and a significant one, where we have an accumulated deficit of about $3.8 million in human resources. So we had to rescope the budget, and we took those dollars out last year and started to rebuild that. This administrative review was intended to help do that, to make sure we were covering necessary needs for human resources across our very disparate system. I think this has given Jennifer a roadmap. I will say, I don't think there was anything so surprising that came out of this report. We didn't frankly expect it to be. The partner that we selected to participate with us, CampusWorks, participated in a review of all administrative functions under finance at Western Washington University, so they had familiarity with the state at least. I think the review, I'm personally mixed on some of the findings. There were findings that we will address. There are some findings we will say thank you and put it away. One of those findings, just to name one of the slate, was frankly to add more individuals across the campus to serve needs. And we're not in a place where we're going to add additional staffing to do that. What this ultimately comes down to bury the lead, as I've done here, is to say human resources is about managing expectations. What do our kids think they need in terms of this support? And we have a long way to go in managing expectations. I will tell you, with 10 academic units and 6 campuses, we have 10 different ways to hire a tenure track faculty member. And that's not going to be productive. We're going to have to figure out what is the best practice and what can we all do to make sure that we are meeting that expectation moving forward. Take it away. Thank you.
So as promised, I will be brief. See if I can get the clicker to work.
We've got this air conditioning vent
Oh,
over
I'm
here,
sorry.
so-
Can you hear me
yeah.
now? I will be brief if I can get the clicker to work.
Maybe
Maybe I need the other one.
When in doubt.
Right?
There
Oh,
we
there we
go.
go. Okay. So Leslie's given a great background here today. So, and I have no intention of reading this to you, but this is kind of how we started between an academic as well as an administrative review. And first among the administration was HR. A little bit about our scope and goals. As we started this activity, we did look across all human resource functions. So that includes recruitment, hiring, our FMLA processes, benefits, learning and organizational development. And so all of those were part of a comprehensive review. We also partnered with payroll a little bit. So from HR to payroll, we have inputs such as time entry, and that moves through the process, and pays people, of course, comes out on the other side for finance. So we did have a little touch point with our partners in payroll. And then these were our goals, really was to come out and evolve from some of our old processes to relieve some of those pain points we have, and again, be able to set those expectations across the system. How did we do this? So partnering with Campus Works, they conducted individual interviews. They conducted over 225 individual interviews and group interviews. So they met with a lot of people across the WSU system. We also sat together and worked on process review. Those process review sessions were approximately 10 sessions at about 4 hours each. And again, included members from Human Resources Unit, payroll, as well as a lot of our constituents across the space. When we got the initial review back from Campus Works, there were recognizable themes here, and I've pulled this right from their draft report. Again, I won't read all of it to you, but part of that was restructuring, looking at our existing organizational structure, enhancing our service quality, and supporting our long-term institutional goals. Leadership oversight. As Leslie stated, I stepped into my role approximately 8 months ago, but prior to that, I also had 2 other roles. So they do call out a little bit of leadership, maybe oversight here. It's that maybe my plate is a little too full, which is not unexpected. Workday stabilization. There are spaces within our Workday application that could use some work. We know that. And so that's called out here. Employee wellness and benefits initiatives. We did have a robust wellness program. Through some reductions, we have now limited that more to resource sharing. We were much more active in this space, but that was something that was ultimately moved on during a budget reduction. Collaboration and customer service. So this really talks about human resources connecting with our departments and our stakeholders and having a more active presence on each one of our campuses. Expanding and our existing operational practices, really they're talking about recruitment, hiring, and onboarding here, which we know we have some work to do in that space as well. And then finally, benefits administrations and efficiencies. We do have some manual work that it happens in order to get our benefits into our state system. And so that was another call out from their themes. With all administrative reviews, there are some values and there are some challenges. So I just want to talk briefly about some of those values. We really spent time dedicated to this engagement. And in a time where we're all so busy and there's so many things going on, this really gave us an opportunity to sit at the table together, talk about what's happening out in the space, and really review our pain points and put some things just out there to have some dialogue with our colleagues. So that was really, really valuable. We also talked about solutions as part of the engagement, and then also tried to understand where those limitations are, because sometimes people have really great ideas. It's just not something that we can do from a system perspective when we talk about Workday. And so we were able to just have some candid conversations around that. Challenges. During our engagement, we did take a pause before we moved into our process review. And that was because the initial steps during the process review were not aligned with expectations. And so we had to go in and recalibrate. That caused a 2-week pause. While sitting at the table together is really valuable, spending 80 hours with my colleagues across the system was incredible. It's also a lot of time dedicated to an effort. It is a significant effort to do those things. When you're working with a firm, sometimes you really only get surface level context in some of those spaces. And so you really need to dive in a little bit further. And that's going to be a challenge for us because we still have a lot of work to do. We really need to dig in. And then, as Leslie had expressed, setting expectations and recommendations to be able to move forward.
And I want to add, in the previous conversation, we were talking about the unfortunate place that we may be with losing federal grants or even losing state dollars. and being in a place of separation with some of our faculty and staff. This unit is at the head of that. They will have to be ready to be able to affect that as soon as we know what our budget situation looks like. So we have to have them prepared to be able to be supportive to the campus.
Finally, in terms of next steps of the engagement, really, it's just the deliverables. We're looking to finalize those deliverables. And then from a WSU standpoint, we really need to review those recommendations, prioritize, form work groups, smaller work groups, cougar groups, if you may, and then implement those changes.
I would love to recognize Jennifer for this work. I mean, she was new in her role, and I asked her to be the first one out of the gate doing one of these administrative reviews. Well, I will say we had good work from our partner. Our partner did start going down a path that we didn't agree with, and that's why she had to pause the work, because frankly, it was getting contentious in the rooms. So she recognized that and was able to rescope them and save the engagement. So I really want to applaud Jennifer for the work that she did there.
Thank you.
Question. Thank you first for jumping in and doing this, because I know it's just been a very short period of time, and it is hard work. When I heard on some of the listening sessions that I was on, the primary thing that I heard were concerns about the recruitment and onboarding. You said that that's going to take a little while. Do you have a feel for what the time frame might be to sort of get the time more condensed so that we can bring people on quicker and et cetera?
So I think that something that Leslie said earlier, where we have units that have the ability to hire an individual in a variety of different ways, the autonomy there creates some inconsistencies, and it can create some frustration and some lagging timelines. So we want to develop an efficient process and an effective process that everyone follows, and then to be able to move that forward and then continue to measure and monitor that to make sure that we're moving forward as quickly as we can.
And then as far as the long-term monitoring, will you periodically, as part of this whole process, sort of tap into the customer base and just get their impressions about, are things getting better? Are there still some things we need to do?
Absolutely. So the relationships that we have with our stakeholders out in the group, out in the system, first of all, they'll tell me. They'll just call and say, Jennifer, this is not working for me. Or, hey, can we talk about this? Because this is just inefficient or it's not working. And so I'm very thankful for those relationships, because we don't always know what's happening out in the units, and being able to tap into that and having those relationships is invaluable.
Thank you.
Jennifer, before you go, the slides that were up there going over this process talk about a number of things that have occurred. I think a side piece, which is important to talk about, is that there's been a relationship reset between HR and certainly the academic side of the institution. I've actually had deans praise Jennifer for her work and a different approach. Let's say that wasn't exactly the narrative that we had a couple of years ago. There's a lot of hard work to move forward, and that's going to require those relationships. We can't have 10 academic units hiring faculty in 10 different ways. It's insane. Without those relationships and trust between the two groups, there's no way to do that work. We're in a space right now where we can do it, where the leaders on the academic side trust Leslie, Jennifer, and her team to do that work. And it's hard for me to understand how that reset happened that quickly, because it's a real market change of just a year and a half ago, where we were getting really deep anger about the work, and it's an absolute 180 right now, which is incredible. Jennifer deserves a tremendous amount of credit.
Sure.
And I know you love the public praise.
Thank you.
Chair Shower had a comment.
I just want to build on what was already said. So I me to say that my husband served in the Navy in the construction, the Seabees, and their motto is can do. And in the listening sessions, what I heard was can't, don't. And what I have heard over the last 6 months is a willingness to listen, which is where everything starts and every relationship is built. And so I love hearing what Provost Riley Tillman just mentioned. I also just want to say, from my perspective, I've had the opportunity to work a little closer with you. Bringing in consultants and having them do any sort of audit or assessment is never comfortable. And so not only going first and having this review occur, which Leslie, I really appreciate you doing this, having the ability to take what was given to you and continue to build on it is just really phenomenal. And so you and I've had the opportunity, like I said, to work a little closer together. I'm just very grateful for the way in which you show up and the way in which you're leading right now. I think to Leslie's point, we're going to need the HR team set up, ready to go with deep relationships within WSU to not only continue to set up systems that make sense, but also ensure that our values are showing up in the way in which we're interacting with one another during stressful and hard times. So thank you for your leadership and everything that you're doing.
All right, if I could suggest, those were our 4 information items. We have 15 action items to go through. So perhaps we take a quick break at this moment. Really quick, 3 o'clock. Is that okay? Okay, great.
Food and water.
Okay, so if we
slide
can get
it there.
started, we have 15 action items to go through. And to begin with,
Let's hear some energy around that.
Yeah.
15. That's right.
is my big voice big enough?
It is.
Okay,
record, Jen?
yeah. No,
It's not.
I had more.
I know.
I would like to please invite back our Executive Vice President and Chancellor of WSU Health Sciences and our Chancellor of Spokane, Daryl DeWald, who will join Leslie to talk about our first two action items, the proposed academic year 2025-2026 tuition rates for the Elson S. Lloyd College of Medicine and the College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. I'll start and then defer to Daryl, and also our Dean of Pharmacy is here as well. The first of the action items is the Elson S. Lloyd College of Medicine tuition increase for this coming fall. As you remember, this was a future action item at our January meeting in Seattle, and it's coming forward as an action item with the required student input. This is a 3.3% increase, just like we did with our undergraduate and graduate student programs. In your materials, you have a table summary that is the cost of attendance. It is not just the tuition for the comparable medical schools. These are community-based medical schools. There are 33 on that list. The university tuition and subsequent fees for the medical school would put us at 14th on that list, just so that you have a place frame of where our tuition ranks. I will say that as part of the accreditation visit last week, I participated in one day of that, and a lot of the comments from the accreditation team were around student affordability, which is a concern, and the debt level that our students graduate with. And it is a commitment of the college and of Dr. DeWald as part of development efforts moving forward to make philanthropy and student fee coverage a bigger piece of that. And that, all yours.
Wow, great introduction. Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate Leslie actively participating both in the preparation and then the site visit for the College of Medicine. So people have asked the tuition increase, what is that for? And I think this is articulated well. If you see offsetting inflationary costs, improving student access to academic and career advising, supporting costs of community-based education, reminding you that our students go out to clinical sites all across the state. And this does come at a cost. So we have to pay preceptors when our students are out across the state, in addition to retain or add additional staff and faculty as is needed. So the College of Medicine kept a Qualtrics kind of a survey open for 2 months so students could weigh in. And as you might imagine, and you can see in your packet, there were some concerns expressed, and they align with what Leslie has already talked about in terms of students concerned about the debt load and where they are when they finish their medical education. It was very reasoned input. We would still like to put forward to the Regents that we would do a 3.3% increase, for this coming year.
And I will add one more item. Linda did not mention the request that we had made to the legislature that included a $3.6 million ask to cover additional accreditation needs for the College of Medicine. That was not included in either Governor Inslee or Governor Ferguson's budget, so that item will be funded. That 1.8 million per year is significant dollars to support the College of Medicine moving forward, particularly as we bring what will be WSU Health into the university.
Yes. And reminding folks that President Schultz has led, we've been to the state for 4 biennial requests, and those have been funded. So this would actually be the first time in that series that we're not seeing additional funding for our College of Medicine. So I would entertain any questions that you might have or concerns.
Just from a point of reference standpoint, when you look at other institutions from a fee structure, I certainly know tuition wise for medical school, we still are an affordable option and access point. How does that compare from a fee standpoint, Daryl?
Well, and I don't know, Regent Dickinson, all the comparatives on the fees, but it might be informative to you to go to UW School of Medicine just to get a sense of the comparative fees. And their tuition is higher, but they also detail out those fees. So we do have additional fees, but it is still very affordable. Reminding you, it is a community-based medical school, but it's still quite affordable. Regardless of that, we have to take very seriously the debt load that our students have, and that is increasing. And that relates to what Leslie was talking about, that we needed to report up to the accrediting body that our projection is that the students would have an accumulated debt on average of more than 200,000 when they complete their work at WSU.
Oh, sorry. As a comparison, what might say a whammy student?
Brett, sorry, if you can hear you.
I was curious how our tuition compared to like a whammy student.
So it is my understanding that, so the University of Washington, and you could go online and see this, but they have different rates for the different years, MS 1, 2, 3, and 4. But their rate for an MS1 is $56,000 for the in-state tuition. It's in the low 90s for out-of-state for MS1s. When a student is entered into the WWAMI program, I've been told that they are reduced from the out-of-state tuition to the in-state tuition. So the WWAMI students are still, by our understanding, what has been communicated to us, they are paying more than ours.
So that would be like Gonzaga student or University of Idaho.
Yeah, so Montana, and I think we're seeing some changes in WWAMI. I don't know if it's right, sorry, I'm supposed to be professional. It was for you. There are some schools that are changing, and Alaska is out. So yeah, they receive the state tuition.
Regent Pika had a comment.
Yeah, I'm curious. We talk about peer institutions a lot. So this is a community-based medical schools. Do we use these schools across the board with anything medical? This is about tuition rates. So do we, so first of all, we're community-based as opposed to
an academic health center,
right,
where we have medical school. Yes.
And this is pretty much our peer group.
Yes, we do different comparisons, Regent Pico, but this is one of the primary ones we use for the medical school in terms of tuition. We make a comparison in regard to the research productivity, and the LSNS Lloyd College of Medicine is in the top 10. I think it's number 7 in terms of community-based medical schools and research. We don't holistically use the comparison, but we do look at it in terms of tuition and a few other indicators.
So would nursing have some other group, or would pharmacy have another?
So nursing and pharmacy also try to pull a comparative, and they do a broader comparison for both of those.
Regent Pika, I will add, I was at one of these other institutions that's on our community-based list. That institution never thought of or referred to itself as a community-based medical school.
Daryl, too, you were setting up work with your counterpart at Texas Tech to not, which is on our list here, not just about tuition, but overall how they're approaching health sciences, what they're trying to do in rural medicine and those kind of things. I don't know if you want to touch on maybe a few of these. You want to do a deep dive into what they're doing as opposed to just tuition setting as
Yeah, what the president's teeing up is we continue to evaluate our 3 colleges pretty actively, how they compare, what we can do to improve. And we started our College of Medicine uniquely when we started at multiple sites across the state. And I know you're all aware of that, but it makes it more costly because you need to have certain personnel and infrastructure at each of those sites to align with the accreditation standards. So we look constantly at other schools. We even do sometimes compare to academic health center colleges of medicine, pharmacy, and nursing. But we will be doing that soon. We'll be going to Texas Tech, but we'll be going other places. We're looking at other comparable schools where they have multiple sites. And in this case, where the flagship is not the home campus for the health sciences. And all of this is done in an effort to improve what we are doing. But we're reminding you, our clinical sites are all across the state. We recruit locally the best we can. We educate and we return locally.
Thank you. So that's our first action item for tomorrow.
Jen, can you speak up?
Oh,
Can't hear.
that's our first action item for tomorrow.
Great. Second.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to the next one is the College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. This item was a future action item at our November meeting, and we skipped over the January meetings. We had not collected the student feedback at that time. This one is a 3.4% increase. I think it's the actual 0.4 instead of 0.3 because of how the dollar adds to it. So it's not 3.3, but it's 3.4.
So reminding the Regents that our College of Pharmacy has a doctoral program, what is referred to as the PharmD program. And they have students that are trained in Spokane and in Yakima, but they will do a lot of their clinical activities again across the state. So you can see the comparative for the tuition from last year. We're asking for consideration of this 3.4% increase. Dean Lead, who's here in the audience, I'd asked him, how do we compare again to our sibling institution that is on the west side? And he indicated to me that we are still about 11,000 per year below the cost of that school. So there are some real changes and trends in the pharmaceutical and pharmacy industry that are affecting us. Our college is working very hard. They're on the rebound in terms of their enrollments, but they adjust the best they can to the changing industry. Right now, we're in a situation, and I think I can accurately represent this, but where our students have lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
We actually, with UW and WSU, will have a shortfall in terms of the number of students to fill the positions that are needed in the pharmacy industry. They generally start at high salaries. Many of them have bonuses. Am I correct, Dean? Yes. So we are trying to respond to the needs. You'll see more of a cyclical demand and supply related to pharmacy more than you do with nursing and medicine. But we're asking for this. You'll note that the students have expressed some concerns. And while we aren't able to summarize all of those concerns, you can see the raw feedback that we got. And we've also taken note that they pointed out some other things that they would like to see us adjust. So it was a meaningful exercise.
I'll say, I think it's an expectation at the health sciences campus that we provide more information to the students about the university's budget overall, and also about what the individual colleges are doing.
Yes.
Do you know the average debt that our firms, you said 200,000 for medicine, what are pharmacy students looking at for?
Dean Lead is the average debt.
168,000 nationwide, we're more about 1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for those who couldn't hear, we're online, 168 nationwide. Thank you for asking Regent McDonald, and about 140 for us. Thank you.
Can you provide some context around the previous increases and I guess just some of the history behind?
Yeah, for pharmacy.
For both.
Regent Vogel?
Could you do both programs?
Okay, so let me start with medicine, and I will then move to pharmacy. And I might ask if you would join me, Mark, here for just a moment. But with medicine, we wrote when the school was started, the college was started, they wrote into their pro forma approximately a 3.3% increase in the tuition rate over time. So that's what they have planned. because they were looking at the state funding and then looking at what was necessary.
Annually or?
Yes. Yes. And then with pharmacy, they made a strategic move recently, which is to reduce the out-of-state tuition for the students so that in order to recruit more students, because often what will happen, as you know, with professional students, is they will move into state and then they will seek residency. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind to answer more in terms of tuition increases in the college over time.
Got it. I arrived here 5 years ago and the students had, before I got here, had experienced back-to-back 10% increases.
Yeah.
Which wasn't very popular, as you can imagine. And so I held off on tuition increases. In 5 years, I've had one at 3.3%. We actually had a decrease, as Daryl says, in non-resident tuition that you all approved 3 years ago, maybe, here. And that was to compete better with non-resident students and bring them into the state because we have this pharmacist shortage in the state. So we brought them in, and Washington's a great place if you're a non-resident because you can become a resident while you're a student. That's not the same in Oregon. When you enter in Oregon as a non-resident, you're a non-resident for the entire duration. But our students only really spend 1 year on the non-resident rate, and then they hop over to the resident rate. So we lowered that, and you all went along with that, or your predecessors went along with that, so we could do a better job recruiting non-resident students to address this shortage. And it's worked amazingly well. We've quadrupled the number of non-resident students in our entering class over the last 3 years. So it works.
Thank you for your question.
We're still about 65%, 67% resident,
Okay.
but they mostly all become resident after year one. And 2/3 of them stay in the state.
Any other questions or thoughts or concerns?
I do have one more thing. You'll have to forgive me. I saw for the medical student proposed increase, there were some mention of some additional, I don't know if it was a service or another employee. Is there anything comparable on the pharmacy side? Because I think, students, when they can see changes or new services, I think associated or following tuition increases, it's easier.
So for medicine or pharmacy or for both, is that what you're?
I saw in the documentation that we have that there was some on the medical side, but if you want to talk about it further for both, that would be great.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is to provide additional support for the students when they come. So it'll be advising while they're out in their clinicals, before they go to their clinical experiences, but also career advising. As I think you're aware, even the process of matching for many of our students is more stressful than the process of getting into medical school. So we're trying to add folks who can support the students as they come into the program. In Dean Leeds College, there's an active process of almost full-scale curricular revision. They're working on that, and they're working hard to support their students too. I don't want to make it sound like we aren't hearing what the students are saying about the cost of their education. It is real, and it's burdensome to them. So we're trying to address that. What EVP Brunelli was talking about is we've learned they would like a little clearer line of sight on what their monies, their tuition is being used for. They want more help, and all the deans are very mobilized to get more scholarship to offset the cost. So that is one of the priorities. And if Mike was here, we have set for the campaign is the scholarship monies for our professional students.
Let me add, I just pinged somebody back in Pullman and they informed me that there was no increase for the College of Medicine in fiscal 22 and in fiscal 23. So both of those years was held steady. To your point, though, Regent Vogel, about students wanting to see something for their tuition, the challenge with our tuition increases is they are often covering inflationary needs.
Yeah.
So when the state does not fully fund our salaries, we have to find that 34% to be able to cover them. You're not going to really see that. If the power bill goes up, you're not going to see that. We're simply keeping the lights on. So unfortunately, there is not a one-to-one tie for new tuition dollar. I get to see something because a lot of times it is consumed by these inflationary needs.
Thank you.
I can't help but ask Dean Lee, because you're there, not related to tuition, but in terms of just around the corner enrollment opportunities, where do you see demand going in the state of Washington?
Predicted up 4.7% through 2030, compared to 4% nationwide for all professions. And so I think it's a very positive trajectory. We've increased entering year class almost 24% each year over the last 3 years. There had been a nationwide downturn. I can explain that, but I don't think you have time. Downturn in nationwide enrollment in pharmacy schools, but the fact that it's growing back at 4% nationwide, and we're growing back at 24%, I think is very positive. And these people have jobs when they average pay is $150,000, and if you want to work at Walgreens in Moses Lake, you can do it for $125,000 sign-on bonus. It's like an athlete or something.
Thank you. I appreciate that succinct context, because we've heard mixed messages, frankly, about the pharmacy school.
Yes.
Thank you. That's great. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Just clarifications. This will be part of the overall health sciences report that we're going to do next month. So see you again. You take it. No?
I don't know. I'm happy to come wherever you want.
Last fall, you launched an undergraduate program, it's a 2-year program.
Last fall, yeah, it's a transfer degree program.
I was wondering how that's going and what kind of student enrollment you have.
Slow start. We started with 2 students, and it's like not very many. We only hired 1 faculty person to kind of oversee it. We covered it with existing faculty. I'm giving lectures next month, in case you want to come. The interest for the coming year is 10. So we want to keep growing it every year. The capacity is 50 per class, I think. It's limited by the infrastructure on the Spokane campus. So we'll hopefully get there.
One more.
One more.
Looking at my neighborhood, I'm up the Olympia area. We see pharmacies and drugstores closing down. Where's the demand going for additional pharmacies? Are they going to places like Costco and the bigger online?
Well, the pharmacy closure is the problem. That's a whole nother thing we could spend a long time on. But I think that the biggest growth area for us is in ambulatory care, which is a pharmacist not necessarily located in a pharmacy.
Nursing homes, hospitals, things like that.
Providing primary care for patients. That's our growth area.
A significant part of each class goes into pharmacy residency.
I forgot about that. Yeah, thank you.
And we started a bunch of residency programs.
Well, obviously, we'd like to have you come back. So next time we'll have you for a different review. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, Leslie will be joined by WSU Pullman Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Ramondo Nash, and WSU Global Campus Chancellor and WSU Pullman Chancellor David Soleil to present the WSU Pullman housing and dining rates for academic year 2025 and 2026. Also joining, I'm just making sure that people are coming in. Also joining to help answer questions are Director of Housing and Residential Life, Meg Autry, and Chair of the Finance Committee for the Residence Hall Association, Jay Lee Irv.
Good afternoon. Grab the right one. And so you may remember last time I talked about just kind of our process in terms of the fees and making sure we incorporated students in big picture and those sorts of pieces. And I promised that this time I would actually bring the students who really carried the load with us to talk about them. And so we'll start with housing. So not going to repeat everything on the slide, but I will actually turn it over to Jaylee to talk a little bit about the process that RHA went through in terms of helping us about our proposal for our rates.
Thank you for having me. My name is Jaylee Urban. I'm from Wasilla, Alaska. I'm currently a sophomore at WSU Pullman studying zoology and pre-veterinary sciences, and I'm the student representative on the Living on Campus Advisory Board for the Residence Hall Association. I'm the Vice President of Leadership and Administration. So Living on Campus, the Living on Campus Advisory Board is made up of 9 student representatives, ranging from anywhere between living in residence halls or being graduate students living in family housing, as well as 4 staff. So the decision we came to increase resident hall rates this year was a difficult one due to the current inflation happening with tuition and just general stuff. So this decision was not only made though to keep up with inflation, but as well to put money back into the halls and updating those more vintage halls located on southern sides of campus that are older, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. So, and this decision was discussed with fellow colleagues and other students, and a lot of students were definitely frustrated to hear about the fact that tuition rates and housing rates were going up, but they were understanding of the purpose to why. And so when we explained to them that in order to maintain halls and not only pay bills, but to put that money back in, they were thrilled to hear about that. So, and this vote that we decided on was unanimous across the Living on Campus Advisory Board. And then for apartment rates, so you're good. This was also to keep up with the current market, but still be competitive within Pullman. So you might also notice that our lower priced apartments have a higher percentage increase, which is a little unusual if you think about it. This is though because last year we increased our higher priced apartment rates more than we did our lower priced. And so just to keep up with everything, the lower priced apartments are at a higher percentage currently. And then for dining rates, this increase is to keep up with inflation increases in areas regarding salary, minimum wage, food costs, employee benefits, utilities, supplies and services, and insurance. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have about the Living on Campus Advisory Board, myself, being a student, or anything. And thank you so much.
One of the things I will mention before you jump in is I really want to give our students credit across the board as we've become very transparent with them in terms of just everything. They've dived into that conversation with us head first. And we've had lots of great open conversations about where things are, where we're trying to go, and thinking about the future.
Any questions?
As a
Julia,
WSU so long ago, I thought the Chinook fee was for the yearbook. Didn't see that. Boy, that's an expensive book. I never paid that much for it.
I have an in the weeds question, but it is interesting, I think, in the context of student fees, how many people in housing and how much of that covers people salaries, people support in housing and dining?
Everything.
It's
We're
all people
completely
support?
self-up. Everything. So we cover utilities, bond payments, people, everything.
Julie, congratulations on your program of choice and study.
Thank you so much.
What specifically are you thinking about doing with your degree around the corner?
Yeah, I'm actually in the progress of currently trying to get into WSU's veterinary school in Pullman. I want to study companion animals and bovine.
Great. Great. Any other questions?
Maybe I'll just say, we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
We could stay and talk to you all afternoon. But Jen has mentioned we have 15 action items. I do want to say that this is an important component for us. We're really appreciative to have a student regent sitting at this table, and we've spent time talking about how that student regent is reaching out to students. And what I heard you say, which I'm grateful for is the students understand the why and that they've said yes to this during a time when a tuition increase and fee increases are not necessarily what anyone would like for us to be in a position to have to move forward with. So we are looking to you to tell us that you've had the opportunity to talk to students and that you're bringing back to us that they've been supportive of this. It makes it much easier for us to say yes as well. So thank you.
Thanks for highlighting that, Lisa. I have one thing. I don't know when the most appropriate time to talk about this is, but I know, Armando, you said that looking at the full package of all the fee increases, there were some strategic and thoughtful decisions around looking at the full picture for students. And I don't know if you want to talk about that this now or at the end or what you.
Sure, I'll talk real quick about it because I know we're timing. So one of the things that we would do oftentimes, right? So we bring Chinook, we bring student health, we bring all those. Historically, we've brought them kind of individually is how we've looked at them. And that's not how students have their experience. And so what we've tried to do now is we talk with students about all of them and we think through where are our challenges, where are we trying to go, what have we held steady, what do we definitely need to raise a little bit higher. And some of it has been ripping the Band-Aid off, right? Some things we didn't increase for 6 years. And we all know that prices have doubled, tripled in some instances over those years. So we've tried to be very honest with our students about that, but not just from a housing and dining perspective, but from, okay, you're living, you're eating with us, you're working out over here, you're utilizing the Chinook, you're getting health services over here, but let's look at that as the big picture and let's figure out what's this number that may be difficult, but this helps us continue the services we're providing, do some of the capital improvements that we need to do, some of the maintenance that we need to do, and those sorts of pieces.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Breath, you're good.
Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thank you. From housing and dining, we'll transition to mandatory fees. And we provided a chart that demonstrates all of the fees that we asked for. To start with this one, we're actually gonna bring up Tania Hendricks to talk about S&A. And so remember when I was with you previously, we mentioned S&A to get it to this meeting, but we weren't quite settled on the numbers because they were in their middle of their process. So Tania has led that committee through their process and now can share numbers and talk a little more about it. And I want to make sure I introduce you fully. Tania Hendricks, president of ASWSU Pullman and chair for our S&A committee.
Good afternoon, Regents, President Scholes, President Cantwell, and Provost Riley Tillman. Thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Tania Henriques. I'm a fourth-year elementary education major and currently serve as the ASWSU Pullman president and chair the Services and Activities Fee Committee. This is my second year serving on the committee and my first year as chair. Today, I'm here to present the S&A fee change and the S&A allocations for the 2025-2026 summer and academic year for WSU Pullman. A little information about the S&A process is that S&A only supports non-academic services that enrich the student experience on WSU campuses. There's an annual fee charged to students who are enrolled in at least 10 credits, and this fee rate is determined by the committee and comprised of students who are nominated by the ASWSU president and appointed by the chancellor. Our committee has 7 undergraduate students, 2 graduate students, and 4 faculty and staff members. We're responsible for hearing from campus groups about their needs and programming opportunities provided, and we review annual and one-time budget requests. We then deliberate and recommend funding based on those proposals. All WSU campuses have completed their student-led fee deliberations. It's important to note that each committee independently recommends an increase or decrease in the S&A fee rate, and Pullman's committee heard from 19 groups with requests for the upcoming academic year. On the screen, you can see the 2025-2026 S&A rate, recommendations by each campus on the bottom table in the highlighted row. So those are the fee rates. And then the table above will illustrate the annual amount paid for fall and spring semester by each full-time student. For the deliberations for Pullman for 2025 to 2026, our estimated FY 26 revenue with the SNA fee percent increase is $8,609,510. We had a balance of $3,427,341 in reserves. And overall, we base our decisions around the overall impact to the students on our campus. Not all proposals were provided funding. Most proposals received partial funding. For the allocations for FY 2025 to 2026, we decided on a 4% fee increase to keep in line with overall increases throughout the university. The 4% is also the maximum allowable increase by state law. In total, $8,018,610 of fee-based revenue is being allocated, and $644,887 of reserves are being used, leaving our reserve at $2,782,454. We also believe that we have a healthy reserve balance and that using some of the reserves for these operating budgets are necessary to prevent future decline in services to our students. And the continued investment will support institutional retention efforts, assisting with reduction in future reliance on spending the reserves. Again, I thank you for your time today and can answer any questions you all may have.
Are there any questions? And again, these are two action items. One is the fee change and the other is the allocation recommendation. So it's your fourth year?
Yes.
Does that mean final year?
So technically, I graduate next semester after student teaching. I'll be student teaching in Pullman at Kamiak Elementary, but I am walking the line this spring because I'm not taking any courses on campus. I'll just be in the classroom. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you just add a little color of what, what falls under services for students and activities? Just a couple examples of that. I think there sometimes is a misconception what falls under that when you go and continue looking at some of our other fees that come through.
Yeah, so from a funding perspective, it's student government, entertainment, SEAB is our entertainment board, student orgs, speakers, facilities, those sorts of programmatic pieces.
Tania, could you maybe speak more specifically, as someone who's on ASWSU, how students use these funds?
Yeah, so for ASWC specifically.
Or just in general, just from your personal experience.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty much SNA funds like every student organization on campus, and we use these funds to then give back to our students. For ASWC specifically, we use these funds as to pay for our student employees. And so a lot of these students rely on these funds for support for basic needs like housing or like rent or any of that. But we also use these fees to like host events, such as the multicultural banquet we host housing fairs, and all types of things. And so basically the funds that we receive from SNA, it all goes back to our students. That is our main goal, is to just give it back to our students. And we do that through various events and through each of the student organizations.
You mentioned the student employees. Can you expand on that?
Yeah.
Are they people that are working within the student government that are being paid? Or is this, because I know we have student employees who work in housing and dining and so forth. So what, under the SNA fee, what types of jobs do they have?
So for me specific, so like the president, the vice president, and all of the members of ASWSU are paid through stipends. We're not necessarily like employees of WSU, but we are paid through stipends with SNA money. And so we receive monthly stipends, and that's how that works. And so all positions under ASWSU are paid positions.
Oh,
yeah.
The housing and dining rates cover the housing and dining.
Right, and that's what I thought, but I just couldn't figure out the employee.
Two of our largest student employers are the University of Recreation and the Compton Union Building. Most of those student employees are supported through SNA fees. Those would be everything from an intramural football official to set up crew at the student union building and the programmatic efforts of those items. While both of those also receive fees, those are oftentimes to the operations of the building itself. The programmatic aspects are supported through S&A fees. And they're both of those, besides housing and dining, are the two of the largest student employers.
Another question is, when you're looking at setting the fees for the next year, how do you go about getting student input broadly?
That's a good question. I would say the committee is composed of mainly students, and so we have 7 students. And with the student input, we're always doing our best to advocate for the student needs. And so as the president, I often think of myself as the voice for the students. And so taking in the student input, I, as the president, I choose a person from each different, I guess, like area of the campus. And I'll pick a student from that campus, appoint them to be on the committee, and we kind of represent that area of students. And so that's when we will make decisions for our students. With this 4% increase that we decided on, we felt that it was best in alignment with all the other increases that are happening. And it was best to keep the services that we want to provide for our students rolling and still in action to be able to give our students the best university experience that they can have.
This was my first year having a chance to watch the process, and it's a fascinating process in a good way. In terms of it's students that are coming to present to the committee their requests. And so it's students right from the very beginning that are a part of everything. It's students then deliberating, choosing, yes, this, no, that, and then it's students approving as well.
And I would also like to add that the conversations around like fee rate increases or when we make decisions during deliberations, it's all student-led.
It's all what I'm sorry?
Student-led. So we do have 4 faculty and staff members that sit on our committee, but the decisions and the way that the conversations are led are all from the students, whether it's undergraduate students or graduate students. It's a student-led conversation, and I think that's the most important aspect of this committee.
I just wondered if there was a way, that you get broader input from the student body, because there's a lot of students and they're paying the fee. So I just didn't know if you did any surveying, anything like that.
No, we did not do a survey.
I mean, but the people who come and present to SNA, right, represent diverse groups of students.
Yeah, so our 19 groups are all students that come and present, and they're all, Student Regent Vogel said, they're all from a diverse area of the university from different parts.
I guess my reason for asking is we hear concerns raised about the costs and the fees. And I wonder if the students really understand, it's great to go in and lobby for your committee or your group. Do they understand the impact that has on what they're paying per semester? And that's sort of the root of my question, because we hear a lot of concerns raised by students about fees going up, the total cost of the education. And so one of the things that it's sort of a question that I've asked a lot over the years is making sure that the student body as a whole understands the impact of fees. And it's great to want a lot of things, but you have to pay the price ultimately. And sometimes that hits the pocketbook pretty hard on some of the students.
Yeah, there's a couple recommendations that I made to our faculty staff chair, and that I will chat with the incoming ASWSU president about it as well. And one is to definitively let's work with Daily Evergreen to share information there. Also, is there an opportunity for us to do a town hall or something of that semblance where we're inviting folks in to hear a little bit about what's been presented and those sorts of pieces too.
Transparency as much as possible is always good.
Right.
Where are you planning to head after you have your teaching degree?
I'm honestly not sure yet. I'm still deciding between going back home to Hawaii. I'm from Kailua Kona, the Big Island, or staying here in Washington. I'm still
You should stay in
deciding.
Washington.
That's the advice I've been receiving, yeah. But I do love home, and I'm so fortunate that my whole family is there. So it's also an option for me, but I'm unsure.
Thank you for being with us today and for your leadership on student.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tania.
Our next two will be the Chinook and student recreation fees. Joining us for this one will be Grant Ricard, chair for our UREC Student Advisory Board, and he'll actually speak to both of these two since they fall under that same advisory.
Hello, I'm here to talk to you about the yearbook. I'm just kidding. I heard you say it and I just could not do it. So with that introduction, my name is Grant Rickard. I am a senior microbiology student. I am the chair of the University Recreation Advisory Board. I've served as the chair for a little around 3 years now, and I've had the pleasure to work with an amazing team on this board. So today, I'm here to present to you our Chinook fee recommendation. Now, what the board comprises of is it's made up of 16 members, 11 of which are students. This large majority being students helps us better understand who are we representing and who are we impacting, as you addressed earlier. Now, may I remind the board that the Chinook is only utilized by undergraduate students. It is not available to graduate students, and it is primarily dedicated for the undergraduate students, as it is located on campus and it is a landmark institution for a campus. Now, one thing I really want to press with the Chinook is that while you may imagine that the Chinook only serves as a recreation space, it is also a collaboration space. I'm sure as Regent Vogel can voice, if you were to enter the Chinook during finals week or the weeks leading up to it, those study spaces are packed. I mean, we are looking at an extreme number of students coming in to collaborate during their academic journey in the Chinook. So what we recommended was the 5% increase. This is the max amount that the Senate could pass, and that was unanimously voted in for the Chinook for this upcoming year. Now, what we are looking at with that 5% increase is that we are going to maintain our goods and services to students while providing a great experience to them as well. Additionally, the Chinook did serve as a warming shelter during some cold snaps in our recent past. So it is also a center for community health as well that we hope to promote in the future. Next, we're looking at the Pullman Student Recreation Center. This is commonly referred to as the SRC. So the SRC was established in 1997. And what we are looking at here is that we wanted to raise the fee enough to maintain our services to students while not impacting the service. Now, what that looked like is we had countless numbers of deliberations that spanned almost 6 months. We went line item by line item and decided, how much is it going to cost us to wash every towel that students use? How much does it cost us to have someone standing there renting out locks? What this came down to is that we had a good strategic plan as to best suit our students and the future of the SRC. Now, when we had our deliberations, one thing that we really wanted to instate is transparency. Now, when it comes to fee increases, we commonly talk in percentages. Now, I believe that if you were to walk up to a student on campus and say, how much do you pay for your SRC fee? Right off the top of your head, they couldn't tell you that number. So what would a 6, 7, 8% increase mean to them if they don't know where that's coming from? So what we have instated is a full dollar increase, which is indicated by our percentile in increases. This allowed us to better understand where the students are coming from and have them have that transparency in budgeting for their future so they may better make academic decisions, whether they were to opt into this fee or opt out. Now, what we recommended was a 9% increase. However, there was deliberations to go higher. Students really value their space in that student recreation center. However, we wanted to be conscious that with so many other fees increasing during this time, we wanted to be conscious that we were not being overstepping and overcharging students, that we knew we could get ahead and we could have that extra money going forward. But we knew that this is exactly what we needed to maintain that service to students and not overstep and be best representative, which is the goal of the board being maintained in a majority of which by students. Now, thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Grant, I have a question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but when we voted on the referendum, that was just last year, right?
Yep.
Why is it that for the increase that year, did the referendum give you all the ability to continue the increase, or why is it that we had to vote last year, but this year it's through this committee?
So we gave, from my understanding, and you may totally correct me, is that we were giving ASWSU the ability to promote or carry out this increase. So first we had to give ASWSU the ability to do so, and that was put to student vote. And last year when we had the student vote, we had the largest student voting turnout that we've had on campus since the Chinook was instated. people turned out for the Chinook, people cared about the Chinook. And it is something that's a legacy that will carry on through Washington State Pullman. And it's something that is really valuable to our students. So that's why last year it was a referendum and this year it was a recommendation.
So was that decision on the part of, we want to make sure that this is something students want? Is that why it was given to ASWSU last year, or?
I think that's part of the legislation.
So he's 98% correct.
Okay.
So when the Chinook was built, we actually did not build in a process to be able to maintain the building. And so the vote was around giving us the ability to be able to do increases. What had been happening, and if I went back to the slides, you'll see that I think it's 7 years were
Zero, right?
zeros. So what had been happening was for us to be able to operate the building, we were having to cut hours and close it for the summer and all those sorts of pieces, which not what we want to do for our students. So we had to put in the process that gives us the ability to be able to keep it open and keep staff hired and those sorts of pieces.
Yeah. So Laura, to your point earlier, I mean, students voted for that. I mean, why are they across campus for this?
It actually was the highest referendum percentage passed by the spring. It was just under 80, the percentage last year.
What was it? 80?
80 I mean, and I guess I'll look over at the University Recreation staff. What was the passage percentage of the referendum last year? Everyone's- Yes, I think we had the normal 20% kind of turnout of our student population, but 80% voted in favor of the referendum. Which, if you look at when the CUP fee passed, it was just over 50. The SRC initial fee was under 60. It passed by a wide margin.
Grant, I'm curious, I know this might not be relevant, but $382 annually?
That's, yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to dig a hole deeper.
Thank you.
This is the old bookie, right?
Yes, yep.
You're gonna stop there?
I'm stopping there.
Grant, tell us a little bit about what you're planning to do. I mean, I could certainly see you in communications. So if you decide that you want to do communications, you had a great opening line here when you started, but.
You know, I'm going almost halfway there. I will actually be attending medical school this coming fall. So educator, communicator, provider, all within that same realm.
Where
Awesome.
You'll be very good.
The University of Washington. I know. I knew that question would come up. I know.
Presentation, really good.
Good job.
No, but I'm happy.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Congratulations.
Lucky
No,
for
you're
them.
really good. Is that a purple tie?
Halfway. It has a little bit of red in it if you get a little bit of crimson.
Outstanding. Thank you.
You know, I gotta say, that's really good. No notes. Good.
Oh, yeah.
We can learn from it.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Congrats
on getting message.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good. Great accomplishment.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is our Compton Union building, the Cub, as we call it. Joining us for this one is Cristo de los Santos, the chair for our Cub advisory.
You know where that is, Sam?
Poor Sam.
That's the former gym where we used to play basketball. Go away.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see your lovely faces today. My name is Cristo de los Santos, and I'm currently a junior pursuing a degree in Management Information Systems with an anticipated graduation date of May 2026. I work as a building manager on the Pullman campus at the Compton Union Building, also known as the Cub. And I also have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Cub Advisory Board. The Cub Advisory Board is made up of 9 students and 6 staff or faculty members, all of whom together ensure the continued success of the Cub. Our board focuses on shaping the long-term vision of the Cub and ensuring that budget allocations align with the needs of students. This process involves careful consideration of both the student feedback and the broader operation needs of the Cub. And each year we assess that situation and make any necessary adjustments to enhance the overall student experience. In the fall semester, we found ourselves meeting more frequently than usual to address a very important decision, an increase to the mandatory cup fee. We know that an increase was necessary to maintain the high standards that students expect from the cup. And after many, many discussions, the board reached a unanimous vote in favor of an increase of $15 per semester. This was not a decision we took very lightly. We recognize that without this adjustment, there would be a significant risk to the quality of services and maintenance that students really rely on. And so by implementing this increase, we ensure that essential services remain accessible to all students without compromise. And the deliberation process was very thoughtful, very thorough, considering that the potential impacts on students, the financial realities of maintaining the cup, and how the increase fits within the broader context of the recommended fees across the university. Ultimately, we concluded that this increase is the best interest of the student body as it allows the Cub to continue to serve as a vibrant and essential hub on campus. The Cub Advisory Board strongly recommends a $15 per semester increase, and we believe that this increase is very critical to maintaining the Cub's operations and ensuring that it remains a space where students can relax, hang out, get food, and engage in a variety of activities. Thank you for your time and consideration. We appreciate the opportunity to present this to you all. Any questions?
No questions? Well, infomercial, I think you can share with us what your plans are for this summer.
Thank you for bringing that up. I actually got an offer to work at Boeing this summer for an internship under their business operations intern program. So I'll be in Seattle this summer.
Good.
That's great, Crystal.
Where?
Seattle.
Nice. Where are you from originally?
I'm from the Big Island of Hawaii. Tania and I grew up together. We're from the same town.
The WSU pipeline.
Yep.
Can I ask a question just on how is it just with that retail space that you guys have and how challenging is that to find tenants for those spaces and
The food venue area? Yeah. That's a great question. The ones we have now, we've had for a considerable amount of time. We did have one vacate that we will have, it's public, so I put out. We actually have Little Caesars joining us, right in time for our summer orientations. So that space is actually pretty easy, I'll say, knock on wood, if someone leaves, to find vendors for. We do have a location towards the basement area that has been vacant for a while, but we've turned that space actually into a place where students can study and hang out and those sorts of pieces, which actually I think is working well for the students.
yeah. I asked that because I noticed that vacant space downstairs like that and the Cub is one area that you really could generate or look to seek how to use space in different ways to generate revenue, which I'd encourage you to kind of keep thinking about. There's lots of things on campus that, I'm sure students would like, but I also recognize the challenges sometimes it is to attract them to sign a long-term lease or something, so.
Thank you for being here. Certainly, we are pretty excited about your internship, particularly because someone sitting to the left of me started her career at Boeing as an intern.
I actually met with her after I was here last year and I was like, I really want to connect with you. I read your bio and I was like, I need Boeing. I need Boeing. So I met with her, got all I needed to do. And yeah, here I am.
Awesome.
On that track.
Well done, both of you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Last one for us is the Cougar Health Services health fee. This one joining us for Cougar Health Pullman will be Mackenzie Hammonds, the chair for our Student Health Advisory Council.
So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mackenzie Hammonds. I am a senior majoring in biology, the minor in psychology on the pre-med track, and I am the chair for the Student Health Advisory Council. This council is made up of about four officers that meet bi-weekly with our main goal of voting on the student health fee. The decision to increase the student health fee from $244 to $256 was made to help with the maintenance of the building and the access to services that are provided, including counseling and psychological services, the medical clinic, vision clinic, pharmacy, Cougs for Recovery, and health education. Cougar Health Services also provides students with availability for appointments in a timely fashion that is not available out in the community. The decision was unanimous among the board members, taking into account the services that are provided, the access to care, and the providers that specialize in helping college-age students. This is our first time going into navigating our healthcare on our own. Thank you again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Can you speak to what is incorporated in the student health fee and what that might cover for a student that's arriving in Pullman or in Vancouver?
Yes, so the student health fee covers all of the services that are provided at Cougar Health, including the counseling and psychological services, which includes crisis appointments and initial intakes. You can call in and get an initial appointment, as well as psychiatric providers, group therapy, individual therapy, and neuropsychological testing. It also goes to the medical services, which have primary care services, respiratory care center, well visits and acute visits, as well as an STI testing center. The pharmacy, which provides over-the-counter products, Plan B, transferring us of prescriptions, and counseling on your medications. The vision clinic has acute services, routine eye exams, lens cutting, and a frame donation program for students like myself who wear glasses and they may break and go in and get them fixed. Other resources like same-day mental health, like I mentioned, lab, x-ray, ultrasound equipment, and a point-of-care lab. And of course, maintenance of the building. The building used to actually be the hospital for Pullman, and so it's in a pretty old building, and there are some maintenance issues like in the bathrooms that need to be taken care of, and so that's where the fee goes towards. Thank you.
That's where the facility is in the old hospital?
Yes.
I remember that, Sam.
I know where that facility is.
Did you say pharmacies included?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have lots of vintage buildings across my portfolio.
Could you please remind me, is student health fee an opt-out or a requirement? Okay, so if you don't present other medical insurance, or you don't have the option right now? Okay.
Students who, in terms of can buy the student health insurance plan, and our international students and graduate students have access to that plan. Students will not be turned away for services if they're uninsured, or there are oftentimes as we bill back to their insurance. Sometimes we are not, we can't bill their insurance directly. So we will then pass, again, students will be seen, and that's what the fee really provides, is the access. It would then be billed to their student account for those services if we were unable to collect from their insurance. But we will see every student if they have insurance or not.
But the students who have insurance don't get a discount?
We bill their, I mean, if they have insurance, and oftentimes from the state, we would bill their insurance like any other provider in the community.
But
And
they
the
still have to
insurance-
pay the fee.
They still have to pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah. The fee really designs for the access. This is how we pay our providers and our physicians. Current turnaround in the Pullman market is probably 3 to 4 weeks to see a provider. This allows the students to have, most appointments are seen within 24 or 48 hours, certainly with 1 or 2 business days. This allows for that access for the students.
A question. So I get sick, I want to get sick in Pullman, that's Spokane.
I will not answer that.
Good choice. But the price differential.
Is this Spokane facility smaller?
I don't have much information around the Spokane facility, to be
Our
honest
next
with you.
fee
That's our
is
next
the
fee.
Spokane. So let's talk about that.
It's 2 separate ones.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Tell us about yourself a little bit.
I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. Like I said, I'm studying biology with a minor in psychology on the pre-med track with hopes to be a psychiatrist. So,
What are your plans this summer?
I'll be working as well as studying for the NCAT in my gap year.
Okay.
Thank you.
so much. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time. Want to make sure I give kudos to our students who are excellent and phenomenal and have helped me really work through this first year. Wonderful.
Good job.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so speaking of the Spokane fee,
Kyle, can you bring that back up, please? So our next fee is the change for the Spokane help fee. I want to point out, there's an error on the slide. The current fee for the Spokane students is $210. The change that is being proposed is a $50 change, not a $60 change. The action item is correct. That slide is incorrect. All yours.
Thank you, Leslie. So you'll see that there was a process and we have a process underway. And I will just be really clear that we are going to do better. Our students in some of our programs have to have their own insurance to enter the programs. What we are trying to move toward is where they have the same access that was described in detail in Pullman, but we are not there yet. We're using a couple of different approaches. We engage our students. What they focused on this year is the need for counseling and psychological services, and they asked us to address that. So we are doing that. It is not a stopgap. It is a step that we will take toward broader services there on the campus. So you can still get sick in Spokane and be okay. Regent. So, okay.
Well, I liken it to like, the irony is that, it's like when you go to your hairdresser and she has bad hair, but does a good job on someone else's hair.
So Regent, I
Now
have,
you're going to a medical school, and you're there with all of the expertise, but.
I have no idea what you're talking about. But thank you.
I knew that was.
Yeah, well. So we will continue to engage with the students. We are engaging with the providers actually in all three of the colleges, and there is a plan that is coming together. And we hope that we will put that together, but it's about a faculty practice plan and how they would serve our students. We have piloted some of that. We need to take the next steps. This is to make sure that our students are being served to these critical services that they've asked for. Any questions about this? Thank you for your time. And thank you, Regent.
okay, so our 11th action item, Leslie, do you want to go ahead and?
Yes, and I will be joined by Tony Opham, there he is, magically, our Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer, who will discuss the tech fee allocations for the Pullman campus. And I will speak to the Vancouver campus unless Chancellor Metzgammer would like to. But Tony, if you would go ahead, please.
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Not surprising with the decline or the projected decline in enrollment, the dollar amounts that the students had to allocate was significantly less than in the past. And so it should come as no surprise that the amount that they funded was just a little bit north of 150,000, around 150,000 less than the previous year. This has got several consequences that are associated with it that I want to highlight. First of all, that while the pot, it was significantly smaller, the requests are still about the same and the dollar amount was actually a little bit higher than the previous year. And so the trend that is, at least for the past several years, is it then results in longer deliberation by the students. And they were doing a great job. To kind of put some numbers on it, that while the number of submittals tends to stay around a couple of dozen, 24 last year, 23 this year, the number of funded items by the students was actually, in other words, the percentage of projects that were funded 100% as submitted was half what it was the prior year. So what we're starting to see is a trend that as money becomes more tight for everybody, the students are taking their responsibility very seriously and holding the student submittals to a very high standard. And that shows, I guess the best way I can say it is someone who's having to start making tough choices about dollars. It's nice to see that those who are going to replace me in some time are taking this charge very, very seriously at such a young age as well. So I couldn't be more proud. I'm sorry.
Tony, I would just add, that, of course, the amount has gone down as enrollment has gone down because this is an enrollment-based tuition rate that is charged to the student. So that's what results in less dollars. I do believe there has been some use of fund balances in the past as well from funds that have accumulated over prior years. There is a note in the information item, and it came up in our preparatory meeting, that some of these dollars are used to complement dollars that we receive from the state to enhance the general use classrooms. These are the classrooms that are the bigger spaces that don't belong, and I use my air quotes there, to one of the colleges that are assigned by the registrar so that we are placing the appropriate numbers of students in the appropriate spaces around campus. And we do receive some dollars from the state to enhance those facilities, but some of these are stepping in and helping that as well. That process is controlled by Olivia Yang, as you know, but also the provost office weighs in on that.
Yes. For this item and the next one, I still think it's worth the board considering in the future whether this could be designated for approval to the president instead of being a board item. If the fees were going to increase, that's clearly a board item, but just the distribution of this, it seems inconsistent with some of our other fees that the board approves these distributions, but they don't approve other ones. So there may be some particular reason, but this always seems to me to be the kind of thing that here's how a group decided to spend them as long as they're within those guidelines. It doesn't feel to me like a board issue. And anyway.
Well, and you'll remember back in the fall, we had to make a very minor change to one of these because the student group did something a little bit late, and it, in terms of the dollars, it was a lot for this body to consider that very small amount of change.
So we should take note of that.
Yeah, it's just for next year.
Process change there. But so just to be clear, the action item is distribution allocation approval.
Yes.
And you can see that the amount that they are able to distribute is significantly lower, just by virtue of collection. So, okay, so are any other questions on this technology allocation proposal? Okay, that'll come up for action tomorrow. So our next action is a Vancouver specific.
Yes, WSU Vancouver has two fees that are before you. The SNA fees, which have already happened, and the student technology fee, which I'm here to address. Once again, you'll see that our allocation has gone down. I thought I would just share, this fee was started by students because they didn't want to have to pay by the page for printing. And so that's really the reason it came about. The other reason was because they wanted Wi-Fi in the parking lots, which actually turned out to be a really good thing for us to have during COVID. And so it was not a bad thing for them to want to spend dollars on. The fee was $20, then the fee remains $20. They are considering changes to it. Very few students print, and a lot of the dollars that's allocated for printing tends to get put back into the funds for subsequent use. But the core projects tend to stay the same. Very student focused. The laptop loaner program is one of the bigger expenses associated with that. We're now in the process of having to replace some of the original computers that they purchased. And you can see Wi-Fi expansion also remains big. They want it ubiquitous on campus, and we're pretty close to getting there. So that's mainly the tech fee in Vancouver.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're gonna pivot a little bit here. Yes, we'll be joined by Professor and Director of the Paul G. Allen School of Global Health, Thomas Kalula, to present this and to present establishing tuition rates for the University of Nairobi Joint PhD Biomedical Sciences.
Perfect, thanks. Can you hear me all right there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
great. Thanks for letting me join. I think this was an information item last time, or at least the program, but just maybe to remind everyone real quickly. We have a number of faculty that are conducting research, large research programs, and in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And they work with a number of students at the University of Nairobi who are enrolled in the doctoral program there. And so our faculty, WSU faculty there, a lot of those students are working on grants and contracts that we have there. You've heard about some of them earlier today, and are significant participators in the training of them in their doctoral degrees. And so in this joint degree program, what we have is that where students meet the certain criteria and a certain amount of engagement from our faculty there, which are the same that would be expected for a student getting a PhD here in the Pullman campus, that they would be awarded joint degrees at PhD from both WSU and from the University of Nairobi. And so I think I've been listening through the day. I think this is the first request to charge people less. I don't know if that's true, but that's what seems to be the thread. We're asking the students who we already know then would be qualified for this degree, that we would charge them a nominal fee rather than tuition. There are reasons for that. Part of it is about what happens if you do like a tuition waiver, that has tax implications for them and things like that. So I think maybe Leslie can explain better some of the nuances of sort of why we structured it.
Thank you,
but
Tom.
that's our ask. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. We've been back and forth on this one many times, but I will point out that we did add a couple of lines to the action item that did not appear there when you saw this as a future action item. And the reason is this is a grant supported entity, and we wanted to be very clear about what happens should the grant dollars be changed in any way, whether they be rescinded or returned. And I want to read those lines to you. The proposal will neither result in a net loss or gain of institutional resources. The College of Veterinary Medicine will cover any associated costs, particularly if extramural funding is not secured. The dean is fully aware of that, as is the provost's office, that we wanted to be very sure that we are not making an institutional commitment should the grant dollars go away.
Can I say something positive about the whole thing around USAID? Because we were hugely impacted by that. I'm going to take 2 seconds. The day that we knew that one of those projects was terminated, we were informed that we got a $6.4 million award from the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness group. So we're not dead. We're still going. We got strong research programs, and I think times are different, but we're still getting support for what we do at WSU.
Keep going.
It's weird times, but we've got great people there, and boy, they are proud Cougs. You can't swing a cat down there and not find people with WSU hats on, and they love our brand, and great supporters of us, and great people. So I'm happy to keep that. We've got a lot of good work going there and supporting local communities.
Tom, how many people do we have there?
People like faculty, we have 5 faculty there. We have a full-time staff there of about 13. But then if you go on to our research projects and start adding up, we got about 135 people that we employ. And that ranges from field workers to translators, graduate students, some technical staff. It's a large group, and we work broadly, not just in Nairobi, but we have 3 or 4 places out in the country and in Kenya where we work. We've been working in Uganda with the recent Ebola outbreak, and doing some other work in Tanzania around rabies elimination there as well. So yeah, it's a pretty impressive operation.
Tom, I have a question. You mentioned the impact of USAID, but the alternative sources of funding, do you have a broad proactive outreach plan to help?
Sure, yeah, we do, and we have tremendous support from the government relations group too. Glinda's has been, I feel very confident knowing Glinda's on our side. So we have a pretty broad portfolio. So USAID, so the 2 that we lost, so one of them was fairly new, so we hadn't gotten very far deep into that one. And then another one, the Animal Health Innovation Lab, is one that we're actually hopeful is going to get picked up by maybe a different US group. It may not have completely matched with USAID. But we have funding there from DOD, from NIH, CDC, FOA, and then we have some Gates Foundation funding. We have a pretty broad portfolio, and that's what's helping us weather this for sure. Percentage-wise, that USAID grants that we lost is probably about 10% of what we had there, but then we picked up almost half of that with this new proposal that we just got. So that's, again, we've tried to be strategic about making sure that we've got broad funding sources, and we look beyond just government resources and try and get philanthropic funding and look to private foundations as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I just think it's great to have Tom here so we can hear what's happening when some of these drop out, and it's challenged, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's just great to be able to have that narrative.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
It's different, but we'll be okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we are on to our last 2 action items. And we'll be joined by Executive Director of Policy and Governance, Danielle Hess, to present proposed changes to the Washington Administrative Code 504-35 Facilities Use Rules and Washington Administrative Code 504-31 Conduct on University Property.
Most exciting 2 issues for last, obviously.
Bated breath.
Welcome back.
So just as a little bit of background, the Washington Administrative Code regulations, these are WSU's administrative regulations. They're subject to the State Administrative Procedure Act and its rulemaking requirements. So this is an extensive process. It includes notice to the state code revisor, an extensive internal vetting and approval process, followed by a public comment period and a public hearing. So for both of these proposed changes that I'm talking about today, no public comments were received. The first one pertains to facility use rules for other than First Amendment / free speech activities. And basically the focus of this regulation is on short-term use and rental of WSU facilities by outside parties. So it doesn't apply to university uses of university facilities for educational, scholarship, outreach, and other university purposes. The revision updates the current regulation in accordance with WSU's current structure and best practices. So just a quick summary, it's in your material, so I don't need to go over everything, but it eliminates reference to the campus use committee, which hasn't existed in many years. It requires risk management in each campus to maintain a list on their websites of approving authorities for facilities that are, quote, most frequently used on a short-term basis by outside individuals and groups and may be rented for outside use. It also requires a fee schedule. Requests for rental of that facility go to the approving authority for that facility, which will be indicated on the website. And the revision also specifies that all outside facility uses are going to require a facility use agreement, which is signed by a university employee with delegated signature authority to sign those particular types of agreements. And this is a best practice in terms of risk management. We require fees for facility use to recoup all costs, direct and indirect, and this is also a new thing. I think there's been some negotiations. There's been situations where users have, advocated for lower fees. And so we're really trying to give the approving authorities the authority to say, no, the regulation requires me to do this and to recoup all fees, direct and indirect. It also gives approving authorities the ability to actually deny a request for certain reasons. And they have always had that authority, but it wasn't explicit in the regulation. So if the request is disruptive of university activities or a couple of other criteria, then they have the authority to deny that. And they asked us to go ahead and set that forth in the regulation explicitly. It requires, this is a big risk management piece too. It requires approving authorities to notify risk management prior to approving certain facility use requests that involve higher levels of risk. And this is intended to ensure that central administration is aware of certain uses that are going on the campus. I think we've had some situations where there were facility rentals that involved alcohol or that involved certain activities that raised some red flags and questions and concerns that the central administration was not aware of. And so the purpose of this is to ensure that there's a notification requirement for central risk management of certain activities. And this includes things like 100 or more non-university attendees, amplified sound, alcohol, use of airspace, interaction with animals, any event that requires coordination with non-university law enforcement. And then there's a catch-all if the approving authority just, for whatever reason, feels that a higher level of risk review is warranted by the activity. So we are working with the contracts team and risk management and others on the rollout and the communications to make sure that all the necessary processes are in place and that people are aware of the new requirements. Any questions on that one? Not, I'll move to the next one. And this is the conduct on university property regulation. It's currently called conduct on campus code, but we changed campus to university property because we have a number of properties, obviously, that are not technically campuses. So this regulation is really focused on campus safety and security. It basically updates our administrative trespass provisions. We're inserting more process and more clear language around how that works and what the contents of the administrative trespass notices must be. So it sets forth the required contents of the trespass notices and specifies how they're going to be issued to current students and employees. That's always been a little bit of a tricky area, how you handle that with respect to making sure the dean of students and HRS are involved in those processes. So like the current provision, it differentiates between trespass orders for less than 24 hours and those for greater than 24 hours. And the reason for that is based in statute. There's a differentiation. So you can say, you must leave today, but if you're saying to someone you need to leave for more than 24 hours, then some additional process is required in that case. 24-hour trespass orders or less are not appealable. So go home today kind of order. There's no process for appealing those. But for longer than 24-hour trespass notices, this is only allowed if someone's presenting a continuing threat. They've been told to knock it off and they continue to engage in the behavior. Those are going to be subject to appeal. It's, as I said, it sets forth, the new regulation sets forth the required contents for all trespass notices, and it requires notification of the dean of students or the applicable campus vice chancellor for student affairs when a current WSU student is trespassed from any area needed for their studies or work. And it requires notification of HRS when a current employee is trespassed from any area needed for their work. And then there's also, for these longer than 24-hour trespass notices, there's specific procedures for appeals. If it's a student, it's going to go through the student conduct piece and go to the dean of students. If it's an employee, it's going to go through HRS, or a faculty member, it's going to go through the provost process. So yeah, and then we changed the word campus to property to make it broader. And that's pretty much it for that. It's more of a increased level of process kind of thing. Any questions on that one? Great, well, we'll be asking for your approval of the 2 revisions tomorrow then. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. These show a lot of thought and care in sorting out, how to keep our campus safe, how to keep our policies, in a way that helps us function well. So much appreciated.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, so believe it or not, that concludes our 15 action items. And these will come before the board for consideration at tomorrow's Regent meeting. I'd also like to point out that in your packet are 4 written reports. We have the revised fiscal year 25 Finance and Administration Committee work plan, which is a helpful roadmap to see where we're heading as we enter into the new fiscal year.
And let me add that you will see the April meeting in there, and the April meeting is significant. We've timed it out to be around 4.5 hours if everything remains on the agenda.
That's great.
Okay, actually, a lot of work goes into that.
Yeah.
Really
Here I was
appreciate it.
thinking there's no future action items on here.
So we also have, though, the fiscal year 25 budget execution, the financial performance update report in there, Cougar Athletics. So our subcommittee continues to meet monthly in terms of monitoring Cougar Athletics. And then the major capital projects list is in your packet. Before I conclude the meeting, I do want to extend my gratitude to Regents Blankenship, Regent Cerna, Regent McDonald for helping us with all of the pre-work behind the scenes. Not to mention Leslie and all of your team. Thank you for the extensive preparation and the proactive way in which you're approaching it. Really appreciate it. So that concludes our Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Shower.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. Only 7 minutes passed when we were planning to wrap up the committee, which is pretty awesome because we certainly enjoy having students join us here and be able to engage with them. I just want to say that throughout today, which is a long day, so some of us were here on campus before 7 a.m. And it takes a lot to be ready for these meetings, whether it is those who are reviewing the packet of information or those who are preparing all of the information and getting ready to present to us. One thing that I noticed today was quite a bit of collaboration and gratitude for one another. And while I never want a crisis to bring us together, we are in a bit of a crisis trying to ensure that we're navigating an uncertain path forward relative to changes at the federal government level. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate the work being done together, the inclusion of other teams that need to be part of conversations. Our federal response team is doing an excellent job. And at this table, we have 2 presidents sitting side by side, and I couldn't be prouder of this moment of working together, dressed in our best crimson. So thank you for everyone spending the time together today. We will start first thing tomorrow, and with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So go Cougs.
Go Cougs.